I think I came there exactly in this 2019, basically when the question came up, like, okay, we record the music, but what I'm going to say to the world, because it's like I'm not going to put some nonsense or irrelevant lyrics to my tracks, or like, I don't know, like people when they write about, I don't know, religion or whatever it is, it's like this is totally off for me, because I'm, like I said, I'm not doing it for entertainment. And here I could quote Aaron from My Dying Bride. On his website, he wrote, "This is not done for criticism or for somebody's pleasure. This is my own urge," right?
Greetings, friends. Welcome to another episode of Into the Necrosphere. This week, I am catching up with Roman V of Bizarrekult. They just put out their new record, Tapte Krigen, on Season of Mist Records. The sophomore release in their discography, and if you like the record as much as I did, you're in luck, because Roman and I did a full track-by-track analysis of every single song. That opened up several other avenues of conversation, and knowing my audience as I do, I would be very, very surprised if this one does not rank pretty highly in your list of favorites in recent memory. So that'll be coming your way very shortly. It is a long one, but when it's done, don't go anywhere, because I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on the new Verminous Serpent record, the Malign Covenant. Verminous Serpent, of course, the new Alan Averill black metal vehicle. And then straight after that, as usual, my weekly news rant. This week we're talking about new music by Vredensdal, who just put out another new single. We're going to be talking about Cutted Flesh, Heritoire, and as per usual, we'll get into a couple of spicy topics during that hour as well. If you are new to the podcast and you like what you hear, then please do make sure that you elbow drop the subscribe button off the top rope on your platform of choice. Follow me on social media, and if you really want to support the show, then check out the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store. I've got those two new designs up there, the classic logo design and then the Jason Pepiat design. Thank you to everybody who's bought those designs so far. They are selling really, really well, actually, so I'm massively appreciative of that. And as I've said before, every single cent that I make off the Teespring store gets plowed straight back into the podcast. So, all of the graphic design programs and the, fucking recording programs and StreamYard and the camera that I'm using and all that sort of malarkey, the money has to come from somewhere. I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. It's certainly not something I do for profit, but whatever ducats I make on Teespring goes back into the show. Also, make sure that you are supporting my fellow horsemen of the podcast apocalypse. Every Monday, Brandon Legion will thrill and amaze you with conversations featuring some of the finest actors, writers, directors working in horror today. Every Tuesday, there's yours truly casting hexes and slaying poses on Into the Necrosphere. Every Wednesday, my good friend Sensei Mike Hill brings you a sinister smorgasbord of artists, musicians, MMA fighters, and other collaborators on Everything Went Black. He is back every Thursday with Necromaniacs alongside his co-hosts Jeff Kashid and Mike Scandado, my favorite podcast of the week, bar none. This past week they did a review of the Wicker Man remake, and I laughed so hard at one point that I had to rack up or re-rack when I was at the gym and pause, temporarily suspend my workout. So really, really good podcast, consistently brilliant. And then finally, every Sunday, my brother Carl Hikara brings you the dark, the arcane, and the esoteric on his podcast, Soulnox. So check all of those out. Join us in the fight against woke and shit content. But for now, sit back, enjoy, as I welcome back to the podcast Roman V of Bizarrekult. Welcome back to the show, mate. And I did say this to you before we started, but much has changed for Bizarrekult since our last conversation, and I think probably it's appropriate for me to open up by saying congratulations, not just on a fantastic new record, but also on signing with Season of Mist.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, like 1.5 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Since we talked, yeah.
Well, I like to think of myself as having been one of the first to discover you guys properly, and thrust you into the consciousness of well, firstly the the legions, but secondly, you know, folks like Season of Mist. But I was curious when that. I mean, firstly, I was delighted for you when I saw the news. And I did note straight away, I needed to ask you, you know, how that happened, you know, how those conversations came about, because, I mean, you guys were signed previously to, remind me, Petrichor, which is a label I don't really know all that well.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, it was a spin-off. It was a spin-off of Hammerheart.
Oh,
And
okay.
when I say it was, because it doesn't exist anymore. So.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So you guys were without a label home, and then how did the Season of Mist conversation begin?
Well, I mean, basically, you know, it's like when you are, I mean, we are not like rock stars or big bands. So then basically, you know, you don't sign contracts for 50 albums and so on. So basically, it's like normally it's one by one. So then basically, yeah, I mean, it wasn't really more about being with the previous label. It was more like when the album was out, and I felt like we need a bigger home in a way. You know, we need somebody to take it up and to a different level. So because when we had this conversation with you 1.5 years ago, basically then the second album that was released a month ago, a little bit more, it was basically already there, you know, kind of half through recorded. So, and so yeah, but I mean, like the first album gave some contacts, and I have been in contacts with a few, let's say, bigger and more known labels like Season of Mist and a few others. So it was like, you know, an exchange, and probably the combination of the album, because before we were signed, we showed the album how it sounds, and so I mean, basically it was completed before the signature. So how the album sounds, and you know what kind of artwork ideas I have, and like, you know, basically let's say the business stuff, like the parameters, how the previous was going on, and what I have, and so on. So probably this is the combination that worked. I don't know. So it's more like, I don't know, maybe it's the music, maybe it's something else. I don't know.
I mean, I remember speaking to Gary Holt from Exodus like years ago, and he was talking about, and I think it might have been Tempo of the Damned, which they recorded and then they shopped it around. It felt to me at the time when he explained it to me, that felt to me like if I were in a band, that seems like the smarter business move to make, right? What's the response just generally? And I asked this purely out of curiosity because I find the industry fascinating as well. What's the response like when you go to a label, you know, and rather than a 2-3 song demo, you know, you say, look, I've got a finished product. You know, if effectively you have every single thing here that you need. All I need is a vehicle, you know, with which to put it out.
Yeah. Well, you mean in general, or like?
Yeah. Just let's talk generally first and foremost. And I mean, clearly there would be a overlapping theme with Season of Mist as well.
Yeah, but you mean generally, no, it's like I found it a little bit, you know, overall unprofessional in a way. I mean, I can understand that there are many bands that are trying to, you know, get somewhere and so on. You get a lot of requests and so on. But at the same time, like, let's say I can compare it to job applications, you know, because when you apply for a job, right, you are, let's say, on a job portal, you apply for position X, you know, you apply different places, right? Let's say you've sent 50 applications, right? And you got called in for interviews into 5.
Yeah.
For unknown reasons, right? And then for all other positions you never hear about. So you can compare it to something like this. So majority of the labels don't reply basically to you, you know. It's like either they don't bother replying, or yeah. So I don't know. I guess it's in a way it's a combination of pure luck or whatever. So it's very difficult to predict what is there on the other side, you know, because I'm not working at the label, so I don't know how it works basically.
It is interesting what you say about unprofessionalism, though, because I mean, you've heard me talk about it on the podcast, and if you listen to the news rants, I've railed about it many times. It's rare that you meet people that really have their shit together, and especially if you work in a business role or job yourself. And I work in a business role in my day job. I have, you know, very significant responsibility, and I know how pissed off I would be if people worked for me that operate the way a lot of people in the industry operate that I've experienced. And, you know, Season of Mist, and especially Katie, is a very big exception. But it's she truly is an exception, you know, underlined in bold. So it's,
she's fantastic. So
yeah, no, very, very much so. So ultimately, Season of Mist, what was the I guess what was the catalyst that made you decide on them in particular?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's just the communication and, you know, how it went. And so basically, we can say Season of Mist is very professional, has a very professional approach. So this was, in a way, rewarding and relieving that they are interested. And I had a couple of other considerations, but then, yeah, I decided on Season of Mist simply because it was a combination of, you know, reputation and the history and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they give you any cliff notes and say, you know, we like this, but we think you should tweak this about? Because it's interesting, this new album, you know, for folks that have spent the time listening to it, I think it's a much more challenging record than your previous one. Your previous record was good, but there's kind of a progression to your songwriting, to everything here, that's, I think, quite unique. And I think is definitely straight. It does color outside the lines of traditional black metal quite a lot in a great way. But I can see more conservative labels, you know, like I'm not saying they would do it, but just based on how, or on the types of bands they put out, maybe Osmos would go, yeah, no, you know, let's add more blast beats. Yeah, there's not enough Satan on these songs, so we need to add some. But did you get any input from them on the creative direction of the record and of the band?
When I showed the album, it was basically completed. So when it's completed, there's nothing to change, right? Yeah. And I mean, this is also really good that basically, you know, you show the finished product and say, well, this is my vision. This is what I would like to do. And they just say, okay, that sounds really good. Let's go for it. So, I mean, this is very rewarding, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then, I mean, let's call it artistic freedom. You kind of have your own freedom. So for me, it's hard to imagine that somebody would tell me that, you know, change this stuff and so on. But I would be like, well, okay, well, I'm not changing anything.
Yeah. And I think it's also when you have when you have an artistic vision that sounds as distinct as the stuff on this new record, you kind of have to be headstrong in a way, because you're not necessarily drawing directly from a lot of other bands. You're kind of you're marching to the beat of your own drum, really, to the blast beat of your own drum, I should say.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, it's more like, I don't know. I mean, for me, it's maybe too early to say. Maybe, I don't know, when I make 10 albums, then I'll get a notice. Okay, now you need to tighten up. But so far, I haven't got any inputs on this kind of side.
And of course, going on Season of Mist, I mean, that immediately puts you in the visors of the woke, because Season of Mist is kind of like label persona non grata on some quarters of Twitter, you know, by virtue of the fact that they've got Destroyer 666 on the label. So by extension, all other bands signed to Season of Mist are bad. You wouldn't have. I don't expect you would have had a sense of that, of any of that stuff online.
No, not really. I mean, I have no idea. I'm not really involved into anything of this. I'm not. Yeah, I have no idea. No, never seen it. Never heard about it.
I was about to say it's that cohort of people who feel like they deserve to have a say in just about everything that anybody else does. Okay. You know, and especially when it comes to black metal, I feel like there's a lot of people that really are not about, you know, the American phrase. They're not about that life. But yet they think that they are. And so, you know, Season of Mist, you know, for example, has gotten a lot of flack because they've had, you know, because they've got Destroyer 666 on the label. There's a couple of other bands that, you know, are kind of on the naughty list, you know, and it's not bands that I think are particularly damaging in any way. It's just bands that, you know, have frontmen that are pretty opinionated and, you know, sometimes can be, can stray close to the line of controversy. Yeah. But you're also in very good company. I mean, you've got my brother Mike Hill in Tombs. You've got Strigoi. I mean, that must feel great as well. Because I know from all the interaction you and I have had, you're a fan of this music just as much as someone like I am. It must be, must feel fucking great to know that you share a label with some of these bands.
Yeah, I mean, and like last year we've been playing live together with two bands from the label that I really love. Like the music, I know it like by heart. The guys, regardless om toen bij and the vegan if I had, it was like a dream experience for myself, and just sharing the label with people like that, and also with other legendary bands is just fantastic.
Yeah. So the new record, when we spoke, I do remember you saying that you were in the process of writing it. Thinking back to the first album, that one, the gestation period on that record took a while. Again, from memory, this one obviously being coming much quicker.
Yeah.
But again, also sounding a lot more experimental, a lot more creatively, untethered, I think, to second wave Norwegian black metal. But tell me a little bit about maybe first the response you had to that debut record, and then did that in any way influence the direction that you took this particular outing?
Well, I think let's say for me, it's more like I see it as a continuation. If you just kind of put two albums, in a row, you just listen to both of them. So for me, this one is like a continuation from the first one, but because of this different sound approach that we took, and it was a decision that we did intentionally, like, okay, the music is a little bit more melodic. We have a little bit more diverse, more interesting guitar sound. Then for the sake of this, we need to make it a little bit less loud in a way, less loud, less punchy, less huge, compressed in a way. So then overall, this was something that when we were recording, we were like considering, okay, we can't use the same sound approach as the first album, because first album, let's say, is a little bit more straightforward when it comes to guitars. It's more about like more straightforward riffing, less melodic stuff, right? And a little bit more faster songs overall. So, and here it's like sometimes it's even goes like in doom death direction, things like that, or like post rock, whatever. So then we had to really consider what the sound would be, and it was very great thing that actually it was the same sound producer that we worked with. And after this conversation, he created this sound palette that is so good, I think, because when I got the first version of the mix from him, I was like, wow, this is just, I was just mind blown by the way he curated what we provided, the balance between the instruments and so on. So, and but then at some point it was really funny because I'm not. You have to stop me if I lose track from.
No. Trust me, I will stop you. You still have my interest peaked. So whilst I'm interested, everyone else will be interested.
So for me, it was really like it was like when we were indeed talking like 1.5 years ago. We were recording now. It was not under writing; it was under recording because I started writing it right away when we were recording the previous one, because the previous one was basically something that I had in a draft form in 2009, 2010, so like many years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then when we were recording it, I was just like, oh, well, I was so inspired that I just, kept composing the stuff. So basically, it took me a year to write the music and the lyrics in parallel. And then it was during the Corona time, so I was mostly writing lyrics with, running outside. So like 8, 10, 12 km runs with any kind of weather conditions, just the demo of the songs, and whatever came into my mind, I was like noting it, and even trying the lyrical things during the running, like
during the running. So you're running past people screaming all sorts of shit.
It's like I was always also running like 6 a.m. in the morning, in the cold forest with the rain and mud and all this kind of stuff. So it was kind of like in those experiments when they were doing in like 60s, 70s, when they're putting people in water with drugs, in the darkness, trying to, you know, unleash the powers or whatever, study the brain. So you can say it was kind of this kind of process when you physically detached from where you are. The body is focused on, you know, keep the road, keep this speed, and not falling into into everywhere. But then you are really like in your music, and whatever comes there, it's like boiling there, and it's kind of repeated sessions because I was running really a lot. So it was like really, you know, there was a lot of mind work going on, and then putting it all together. And then I was like, at some point, we also at this time point, I started rehearsing with the guys, with the live crew. And I was like, when we were rehearsing the old songs, I was like, oh, come on, I'm kind of fed up of them, because, you know, now I'm in this new album. So it was like, I'm almost like, I don't really want to rehearse because I'm so focused on the new album. And then I had a period when I thought like, well, this second album is not going to work for public. Simply because it's different from the first one. If people look at this very unconventionally, like, you know, okay, this is the band that has, you know, this specific, you know, sound and catchy, speedy black metal riffing, and then when you present something totally different. And I had these kind of reactions from a couple of people before the album was released, like when they listened to it and was like, okay, well, it's nice, but it's not what we expect from Bizarrekult, you know. And for me, it was like, I'm not really sure I understand what you're talking about, because for me, Bizarrekult is whatever I produce. And you know, it's in this moment, I try to compare it to, like, you know, when you have kids, right? You don't know what it will be, right? So it's like, but these are your kids, and whatever it is, you love them the way they are. People might hate them, right? They don't like them or whatever, but this is your output, right? So, and whatever everybody says, whatever the society says, it's still your output. You know, you can't just say, I have nothing to do with that. It's like, this is your output, you're proud of it. And this is something, yeah, I also had in mind, like, whatever, regardless of anybody thinking about it, you know, like, I don't give a shit. Basically, because there's so much effort in a way, you know. It's like, if we compare it to like people that have music as their job, or, you know, they just feel themselves as people that, you know, create all the time, like professional musicians, let's say, you know, for them it's a very different thing from myself, because for me it's more like there's so much effort put into it. Because for me, it's not, let's say, it's not easy to, you know, to put out things to words and, you know, put it all together. Not because I'm not smart or not skillful, but because I try to put a lot of effort into it. And then for me, it becomes so personal, you know, that it's very hard to detach myself from what I have done. So regardless of what everybody thinks, I think it's a good result, and it is what it is. You know, it's like, as soon as you let it out in the world, it's similar to kids. They are there, and whatever happens, it's like, this will be always your kids.
Yeah. I think there must be something quite creatively liberating about being able to think about it that way, because I you know, I often mull this question when I'm, you know, when I'm doing the news rant, when I'm listening to music, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But there's a couple of things that I've observed over the years, especially when it comes to these older bands that have been around for a while. You know, they make a living off of their music. There's an expectation that they have to play to, that I think can be creatively quite stifling. And Slayer is a great example of that. I think Slayer, especially in their last records, they kind of felt like they had there's like a Slayer blueprint that they needed to follow. The one time that they did color outside of the lines, you know, which was Diabolus in Musica, it was a disaster. I mean, it's a shit album anyway, but people didn't like it. They didn't respond well to it whatsoever. So I feel like, you know, that then sort of creates a bit of it creates a you know, a kind of a glass case, and, you know, you're like the mime, you know, putting your hands up against the glass case, doing whatever is expected of you, but not much else. But I guess in your situation, whether you sell one record or whether you sell 1 million records, it's kind of almost irrelevant. I mean, if you sold 1 million, life would be a little different. But in your situation as it is now, you can just literally write rather than write to expectation, you're writing for expression more than anything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, let's say there's like a quality control, internally, let's say in-house with my wife also as well, because she always has a lot to say there. And then there's like internal control is like, if I don't like how it comes, it's like I'm not going to record it. And then, as you say, I'm not obliged to it. I'm not making a living out of it. It's like, it's not about, making uncommercial music or making a commercial music. It's more about, I do something that I like to do, and then I do it. I think I will do it for as long I would like to do it. If I feel that this is not honest, this is not sincere enough, this is not interesting, this is not beautiful enough, I'm not going to do that. It's just this kind of control thing. And it was kind of funny. I mean, I don't really like to pick up people for opinions, but when the first video of the album was released with this Du Lovet Mai track, there was one comment on YouTube. I mean, okay, it's one comment, but still shows the attitude, like, yeah, you are doing this for money. Like, I was like, what the hell? It's like, okay, where's my money then?
I was about to say, yeah, I haven't seen that check arrive yet. I mean, but I would definitely, you hear a lot of guys like Joe Rogan, people like that, talk about never ever reading comments. I've been very lucky. I've only had a couple of snarky comments. I had one from a guy when I did the face-to-face interview with David Gray. He's like, out of all the places you could pick, you choose an old folks home with kids running around. I did laugh at the old folks home comment. Okay. But I also thought to myself, like, dude, you know how fucking long it took me to get that set up, number one. Number two, that was a two-taker because of my own fuck up. I messed the first take up. But secondly, how many other face-to-face long-form conversations with David Gray you're going to find on YouTube? So shut the fuck up and start your own YouTube account if you want to. Number one. Number two, I same as you. I mean, I've never made a cent out of this. I do every single thing on this for free. I do it because I love the music. I love doing it as a pastime. I have a job. I don't need money from a podcast. If I decided, and I won't, but if I decide today, this Bizarrekult interview is probably the last one I'm ever going to do. So that's it for me.
That is a big honor for me.
Episode 169 and done. I'm retiring. It won't make a difference to my life. I'll just have more time to play Elden Ring. So it's
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's like, you see, for me it was like when we were doing this first album, recording it. It was more like let's close the depth that is laying there from 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
But then in the process of it, because, I just discovered some sides, kind of rediscovered some sides of my life in a way back, and then opened the gates of hell in a way, because I was reflecting so much that it's like reconsidering what I'm doing basically. And then I realized that it's important for me to keep doing this. And then it's like, okay, well, as I said, I will keep doing this as long as I feel that it's necessary to do this for myself. And then similar to what you say is like, if I decide tomorrow that, okay, I'm done, then I think that's it. There's no hard feelings about it. Even, that's it.
No, you would rather do something that's authentic to you than something that feels half-baked, something that feels forced. When you say you discover different sides to yourself, how old are you? Are you're about this? You're a bit younger than me, are you not? I was just about to say I'm fishing to see whether you went through a midlife crisis and also whether you now own a Porsche.
Well, I'm 40.
All right, so, yeah, that's a good time to. I'm 3 years older. Yeah, that's a good time to be reflecting as a man, I think.
No, I mean, I think I came there exactly in this 2019, basically when the question came up, like, okay, we record the music, but what I'm going to say to the world, because it's like, I'm not going to put some nonsense or irrelevant lyrics to my tracks, or like I don't know, like people when they write about, I don't know, religion or whatever it is, it's like this is totally off for me, because I'm, like I said, I'm not doing it for entertainment. And here I could quote Aaron from My Dying Bride. On his website, he wrote, "This is not done for criticism or for somebody's pleasure. This is my own urge," right? And that's the same thing. It's not to be, it's not to satisfy anyone with lyrics. It's just like, okay, I have to say those things. I have to say it to myself and also to other people that understand or might not understand. But it doesn't matter. It's more like, it's like a psychotherapy session. You are there, somebody is listening, you say something, and then, well, whatever impact it makes for you, it makes a therapeutic effect, because you already said what you felt is, on your heart, in your mind, and so on.
Yeah, I definitely get that. It's also, you think about what your legacy is, I think especially at that age, there's, at least when I became aware of it was at the age of 40, like what's your legacy? What are you going to be remembered for? What are you leaving behind? I've got as of probably this episode, 169 podcast episodes, basically just with a bunch of foul-mouthed ranting and all sorts of shit. So my daughter will have plenty to look at after I'm gone. But I want to talk about the record, because, like I said to you before we started speaking, one thing that the Legions like is a track by track breakdown, and partly because my Norwegian isn't up to much, and I'm going to apologize in advance for destroying the pronunciation of any of these song titles. But I am keen to kind of get your director's commentary on the songs, and some of the ideas expressed in them, but also some of the musical ideas, not just necessarily lyrics, because again, this is an album that's creatively a lot more unfettered than anything that was on the previous record. And I had an observation. It feels to me like it's a record that has two gears. Like the first maybe 3-4 songs, kind of have a much more reflective tone. And then the latter half of the record, to me, feels way angrier and way more aggressive. And again, I like it. I like that contrast. But I'm curious to see whether or not that aligns to your take on it, but also whether or not that aligns to the vision that you were looking to create. What you were looking to say. So if we start with "Du lovet meg."
Yeah. But I mean, well, do you want to talk about artwork as well, or I don't know?
Well, let's do the songs, and then let's talk about the artwork straight after that. So, I mean, the thing is, I would also assume, by the way, that obviously most of these songs are all about Satan, given that.
Right.
Like, well, in this song, I approached my love of Satan in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I mean, in this way, because I've just seen your podcast with Mork.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you were touching upon different personalities here in Norway, like Christian Gold. And in his famous video, I don't know how many years, like more than 10 years, it was filmed, and there was like, what is Satan? Freedom, right? Okay, so if we talk about it's about artistic expression and freedom, then okay, well, the whole album is about Satan because it's about freedom in a way. Yeah. But no, okay, jokes aside, so, well, Du lovet meg is like, it's a track basically, so it means you promised me, the title track, the name means you promised me. And basically it's about relationships between people. It can be man, woman, woman, man. You can easily switch roles, so it can be whatever, it can be man, any kind of relationship which is close enough, a romantic relationship, of course. And it's about mismatch of expectation. I mean, the lyrics is about mismatch of expectations and promises, and then what you get in life and how you react to those things, basically, because we all have different promises to our loved ones, and then we all have different perspectives. There's always two perspectives don't really work sometimes, or sometimes it works. And it's about this, lack of understanding, basically, which is at the same time keeping the positive note that regardless of what happens, the feelings are still strong. And it's interesting because with when you think of music-wise, right? It's like a mix of black metal and a little bit anathema-like post-rocky thing.
Yeah.
And so basically it's our combined effort of me and my wife, music-wise. But then I wrote the vocal melodies for clean vocals. It was really funny because I wrote those lyrics on the metro. So yeah, it's kind of, it's like there's so much historical things in writing those tracks and lyrics. And then we made this video. You probably have seen it. I don't know if you want. So it's a beautiful video made by Guillermo Henriquez, the guy from Bulgaria.
Yeah.
So he's also doing videos for other bands on Season Mist. And then basically the way it's filmed, it's based on the story. We tried, of course, similar because this everything is in Norwegian, right? Nobody is understanding it except for populations in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. So the idea here was to translate or try to translate some images into visuals. And then so this script basically was written by my wife. And here the inspiration was in like classical ideas like Peer Gynt from Edvard Grieg, this Norwegian composer. And then this Legends of the Fall movie, with Brad Pitt, like mid-90s.
That was always the movie that made me hate Brad Pitt for a period of time. When I was young, like all the girls when I was in school, like, oh, Brad Pitt is so sexy, and apparently I've never even seen the movie. Like, apparently you see him bare-assed, and I was like, fucking scumbag, you must be a loser. It's only later on I discovered that he's great, but I've never seen Legends of the Fall. But that's my connection to Legends of the Fall. Teenage resentment.
I'll explain why. I will explain the connection to the movie, and then the book from a German author, Patrick Süskind. The guy who wrote this Perfumer guy.
Oh yeah.
So he also has a smaller book, the story of Mr. Sommer. So this is kind of like the visuals that we had with my wife for the plot. So basically there we tried to show that there are those two people there, and he's out in the wild looking for something, wasting himself while she's waiting there. And so at the end of the day, he kind of sacrifices himself without understanding that she's waiting there. So this was kind of, this mismatch of they have both strong feelings, but they don't listen to each other. So things like that.
Now, not to delve into matters that are too private to you, but I'm curious the nature of the song and you and your wife having worked on this together. Is it essentially the two of you communicating to each other, or is this based on past experience?
You mean what do you mean communicating with each other?
Well, so in the way the song is written, that idea of misalignment of expectations, is that a song that's based on your own current experience, and I guess it's about how you get over that, or how a relationship evolves to get over that, or is it more kind of based on your past experience?
Well, I mean, we have been married for 60 years, so, so we had a lot of different experiences. But basically, I think the good thing about this song and the lyrics is that you can generalize it. It's not about me. It's not about my wife. It's in principle, like, let's say there's some part of personal experience, but also it's a lot of observation and, let's say, cultural background, like, let's say, inspirations from other sources, like the few I mentioned. But in principle, it's like, it's not something that is very like an absolutely brand new idea. Okay, let's talk about these match of expectations. But I think it really works. The topic, the lyrics, and I've seen a lot of very good feedback in Norwegian speaking segment of listeners. Like people really appreciated how I make a take on this topic. And what is important is that this contrast between female and male vocals is not the roles, it's just for their, it's just a means of like a tool. Okay, because these are contrasting parts in music, let's also make it contrasting with vocals. But it doesn't mean that these words that are belonging to female and male voices are exactly describing the role of these two people in the relationship, if you put it like that.
Yeah. It actually reminds me, you were talking about Aaron earlier. You know what this, what the idea here reminds me of to a degree? My favorite Depeche Mode song ever, "Shake the Disease."
Yeah.
And I try to convince Aaron for that My Time Bride needs to do a cover of that song. If I ever speak to him again, I'm going to demand to know when it's coming out. Anyway, all right. So next up, we move to Kongen. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. Kongen. Kongen is basically a king.
Yeah, I thought so.
So here you see that's a little bit controversial topic for you, I think.
Don't get me started on the English romantic.
No, it's just, I'm just teasing you. Well, Kongen is basically about mankind in principle. It's about mankind seeing themselves as the kings of animal world, kings of everything living, and destroying the world basically through environment, mass farming, and violence towards animals, people, and so on. So it's written like from the perspective of basically, it starts like a hunter is going out, in the fog early morning. Nobody's aware of him there, and he's luring his victim and then killing brutally and enjoying himself with blood and all the stuff. So, and then basically when there's this part with Kongen in the middle of the track, it also interlaces with a backing vocal that says murder, so that the king is actually the murderer. So, and then it also has some lines that while taking away, I have nothing to give. So it's like you can say it's about mankind. It's, let's say, I don't know, against mass farming, against hunting, against violence in principle, against unprovoked violence that is not necessary, because we have enough of different shit in life. And then when I see, let's say, when I go on the website, like we have a website with different selling secondhand things and so on, when people are inviting others, let's go hunting, and then they show masses of like animals that they kill there, for me it's really provoking, because with all the availability these days, it's like you need to go somewhere and kill someone just for fun. It's just disgusting. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And why I said it's a little bit provocative, because I know you really like meat. And I mean, but I mean, it's not about, let's ban all the meat. It's more about people should be concerned about all the violence that happens around them in the world, also with regards to mass farming, and I mean, obviously hunting and, wars and all the different things that, we do a lot of things without thinking about consequences and things like that. So, and you can say that, you can think of, okay, we jump from really personal interrelationship things into something that is more like political or society oriented. But yeah, that's just how I felt it. It's just, okay, I felt like, okay, I would like to speak about this.
And I think it's something that needs to be spoken of in a sober fashion, right? And equally, as I said on the podcast before, I don't mind somebody having a difference of opinion with me. I actually enjoy it. On this podcast, I like if it's someone like you who I've gotten to know now over a period of time, I think it's slightly different. I think it'd be tricky if Barney Greenway and I started talking economics, because then that might turn into an argument, and I wouldn't want that because I like the guy too much. I know you and I wouldn't argue about stuff that we differ about, but I think we probably share views in common. I mean, I think so. Let's just talk about hunting first and foremost. I've never hunted. I can't. I'm too soft-hearted to do it. I mean, that's just the easiest way to describe it. I understand why it happens in certain instances. I've come to insights around the I guess the value, quote unquote, of hunting. It came from having quite a lot of conversations with game rangers and stuff in South Africa, and they were talking about, when it comes to the way that they manage a game reserve, they have to keep the numbers in a certain balance. He says as they've explained it to me, if it goes outside of a certain balance, then you either have destruction of the environment through elephants destroying your vegetation, or if you've got too many lions, the lions will kill will kill too many other animals. So what they do is they do have hunts where you can go and you can do trophy hunting and kill a lion. They'll have one that they tag. It's usually an older one, and then the money that they get from that, it gets pumped back into the reserve, and essentially that old lion makes way for a new lion. Part of the reason why it happens is because the natural habitat of these creatures have been destroyed. So if we now left it to nature to maintain the balance, it would almost be impossible. And so, again, I definitely don't want to be on the back of the Jeep with a fucking shotgun, or the sniper rifle doing the hunting. That's not for me. But I do have a bit more of an understanding as to why it occurs now over what I had before, because there was a period of time where I was vehemently like, if you aren't, you're scum, and end of story.
Well, no, I mean, it's not about this. It's not about it's not about blaming everyone and about making everyone feel ashamed. It's more about people should be more concerned in general about many things. So it's not, you don't have to take my words too hard in a way. But because there's a lot of negative stuff surrounding this, if what you say is like, okay, if there's a reason that's okay, but if you want to kill somebody for fun, it's it's not good.
I agree, and I would definitely say post-pandemic, I feel like the average human being, or the human race as a whole, has gone off the rails way more. There was a period of time where I was, and I say a period, I say a faint glimmer of time when I had some hope, and I thought, well, we are united against a common threat now. Maybe that'll help heal up some of the divisions in society, and it ended up becoming exponentially worse. And I think you see in society an awful lot now what I would call emotional incontinence. People can no longer they can no longer contain, firstly, their animosity or their resentment for their fellow man, but they're also now rewarded through the toxicity of social media with doing things like openly crying on TikTok. And having these temper tantrums and these fits that are filmed for content. And it's like we used to trade in the currency of a love and affection because we wanted to repopulate or continue to grow the population, or spread our seed, quote unquote. Now we seem to have traded that in for attention. And the attention economy is it's a fool's errand, in my opinion, because there's nothing truly fulfilling about it. So because it's unfulfilling, people keep chasing and keep chasing and keep chasing, but they're never going to find what they're looking for because it's not actually there.
Exactly.
But on a side note, before we go to the next song, as we talk about King, your cover of King Nothing. Well, firstly, I think it was inspired. It's a fucking great song. When I talk about the songs on load that I like, King Nothing is definitely one. Hero of the Day, I think, is a cool song. Bleeding Me, I personally think is the best Metallica song that they wrote beyond And Justice for All. I don't think they've ever written a song that's come close to that song. But what got you onto that tune in particular?
Well, let's say I remember myself in 1996. I was really excited about new Metallica album.
Yeah.
I remember it was like late evening. I got it and I listened to it a couple of times on my balcony. I was like, a little bit surprised, you know, like
yes.
everybody else. But then somehow this track was like really, I don't know, it really got into my mind. And then I had an idea to rework it in a different fashion in 2007. But then I never had the courage to actually finish the work. And then when we already had this new album recorded, I just came back to this because there was this discussion, oh, Metallica is 40 years and all that stuff. And I was like, wow, actually, while we are waiting for release of new album, we can put out this cover version that I had in mind. So I went back to it, but then the agreement with the other guys who were recording the music was if we record it, it should be really very different from the original. So, and this was my approach. I changed a lot. I took the basics, like the main riffs from it, but really made a different structure and added my own riff into it. So, yeah, I think it sounds pretty cool.
It's very different, and I like that. I like when bands do covers and they change the. They add kind of their own flair to it. Yeah, a great example when when Typo Negative did Black Sabbath. I thought that the cover that they did of Black Sabbath, and in my view, it's one of the best cover songs I've ever heard. You know, and I mean, they changed musically the entire last section of the song. You know, they got that whole worship the sun, worship no one thing at the end, but it's fucking brilliant. I mean, that is exactly how a cover needs to be done. You know, this I would say, you know, followed a similar track. So I like that you did something different with it. It is a good song though.
And you know, it was really funny because when we were playing it live, because it's so different. It was really funny because we were playing in Stockholm and people were like, yeah, okay. I said, okay, we are done. That's it. And they were like, we want more. We want more. We were like, okay, we did it. And we started playing it and people didn't get the thing, you know, until the only recognizable riff from the original came in. And they're like, oh, it's actually, we know this track. But also, I mean, we can blame that it's kind of old track and it's not the most popular Metallica album, probably. But then I also heard people who are asking, like, why did you take a track from this album? Why did you take this? I'm like, because I think it's cool. Why not?
And also, everybody has done tracks off the first 4 records, you know, half to death. And, you know, there's only so much that you can do with that. You know, again, I think another great Metallica cover was, I thought the Nothing Else Matters cover on this black box thing that they brought out, where they had Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode doing vocals. I can't remember who his backing band was. Might have been Soul Savers, but either way, what an incredible cover of that song. I mean, a lot of the other stuff is shite, but it feels like, I think it's a brave decision to have taken King Nothing, is my point, because it's just such a natural thing for people to go, okay, well, let's do Master of Puppets, or let's do The Thing That Should Not Be, or something like that. It just, that feels like it almost feels like an easy choice to make in a way.
Yeah, easy, but also like banal, you know, if you understand what I mean. It's like, okay, it's boring in a way.
I mean, the more risky one would have been to do Mama Said. Which I have to admit is a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. I don't mind that song at all. I mean, there's, I would also say, I think not Reload so much. There's a lot of songs I hate, I truly despise on Reload actually, but Load, I personally think Load is better than Death Magnetic. I think it's better than Saint Anger. I think it's better than Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I don't know what 72 Seasons sounds like yet, but so far I've only heard one song I really like off of it. The other 2 singles I thought were crap. And I would say, again, in terms of actual, you know, volume of songs I find listenable, I'd say so far Load is eking ahead of 72 Suns.
Well, I mean,
not Suns, sorry, Seasons.
For me, Load is basically the last album from Metallica I actually listened to, like, you know, in like trying to understand what's going on and, you know, listening several times. After that, it was more like, okay, well, there's a new record from Metallica. I don't care.
Yeah. No, I think because I grew up with them, I've always held a hope that that one day, you know, it's going to be like the pro wrestling bad guy that turns into a good guy again. It's like, it's just that salvation of just that one incredible record, and everybody goes, wow, they still have it. But I feel like sometimes they remind me of a really self-conscious, awkward teenager when I listen to their music. Like, you listen to Death Magnetic, there's definitely an element of that there. I've told people before in a work context, I said, if you want to understand a human being, just try to get a picture in your mind of what they were like as kids, because most likely, especially when they were teenagers, that's going to, you know, there are things that will happen to you as a teenager that's going to cascade through your entire life, and it's going to motivate your behavior and motivate your thinking. And sometimes when I read up about James Hetfield, and there's talk about how he was, really awkward as a kid, very introverted and stuff like that, I'm like, it's coming out in your music, but it's not coming out in a way that's necessarily good. It's coming out in a way that's quite self-conscious. Death Magnetic was a good example. Lyrics like "What don't kill you make you more strong." I mean, Jesus Christ, man! My cat could come up with something more eloquent than that. So. But anyway, the point is, "Bleeding Me" is a great song, and "King Nothing" was a good cover. Now let's move on to the next song. So track number 3 is the title track, Tapte Krigen.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So basically, the Tapte Krigen translates the Lost War, and so it's like when I like I mentioned before, I created those lyrics when I was running in the mud, basically under very harsh conditions. And then somehow, normally I write the lyrics straight in Norwegian, right from scratch. But with this one, I unintentionally started to put some Russian phrases in it. And I was like, okay, well, actually, why not doing that? Because, it's, for me, it's, let's say, this, I wouldn't say the band, but this musical journey is more appropriate to say what Bizarrekult is. This musical journey is also about understanding what I am myself, this path, what is my identity. And as you mentioned before, this middle-age crisis probably is also the reason for this. But you start to reflect and recollect and try to understand what actually what have been your last 20 years basically about, and maybe before that. So then here in this track, basically I mix and blend few things basically. So this idea, because there are 2 languages used there, Russian language and then Norwegian. So this is related basically to the artwork and all the arts in this album, and it's related to a book by a Russian author, Viktor Pilevin. So he made a book. I think it's 1994, 1995, maybe 93. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe 96. So it's a novel called "The Life of Insects." So it's like a postmodernistic approach, where anthropomorphic insects are just, it's a metaphor on life of different groups of people. So it's like different insects are different types of societies, social classes, and so on. So it's a very good book with a very good way of saying many things, indirectly in a way. So there, one of the stories is about a cockroach who is going to work, fed up of his colleagues and everything around, and how he looks, how everything looks, environment, everything. So he decides, fuck this shit, I want to dig out from this place. So he digs really for a long time in the ground and finds a different place. Everybody looks very different. And he decides to stay there, also change the appearance, learns the language of this new cockroaches and so on. But he doesn't understand that they are also cockroaches. Only after some period of time of living there, he understands it. Basically, it's the same shit, same kind of relationships in this small society. It's just they speak a different language. They look different, but he's the same. There are same problems that he's burned every day, same issues. Life didn't get better. It's just become different, but it's kind of still the same. You are still the same person. You have the same problems, same challenges and so on. So he's like, okay, I don't need this shit. I left my life just to become here. I need to find another place where there are no more of the same kind as me. I want to be with somebody else because I deserve something better. And he starts digging more and comes to a very bright place when everything is fantastic, and he realized that that's heaven, and he's now dead. So, you know, it's so, and you see, for me, it was like, this was the idea of using both languages in a way, reflecting on my own life, you know, because I left my home country in hope for, you know, something new, different, better. But at the same time, I'm still myself, you know, I still have the same challenges in front of me, the same, you know, relationship with people and so on. I'm still the same person, you know, and this, you can reflect this or relate this to what you mentioned about Metallica, that they are themselves in their teenage years. But I mean, okay, well, there are some things that you are not able to change, right? And then it's really important to understand that it's not the environment that is, you know, shaping everything, but it's like the solution is basically inside every person, you know.
Yeah.
It's more about reflecting on how you build your relationships with people and so on. So it's not the country that is responsible for things. It's more like you are your own problem, or like the main problem for many different things. So that was the idea, to use two different languages in the song. And also, but basically it's about a war, but I mean, it's not about the war in terms of military, you know, war. It's more about struggle that everybody has in their own life, struggling with, you know, jobs, families, different people, your own problems with yourself, you know, like, and then it's kind of, I felt that I can frame it into kind of warlike framework a little bit with lyrics as well, just to show this, you know, this in a metaphoric way, that kind of in your daily life or in life in general, you are like pushed into some situations when you don't have choice, you know, you don't have a choice. You are there, you're just there, and this is what you can do. You know, your tools are, you know, like in at war, you know, you are there in the trench, and this is what is in the front of you, and this is what you have in your pockets and in your hands. And there's somebody else saying, now you go that way, right? And you can't just turn and run back. So you kind of have to do things, right? Push for goals that are not your goals. You know, it can be society, it can be religion, family, whatever. You are pushed into a very narrow decision tunnel in a way. And then you push yourself, you reach the goal, only to realize that by reaching this goal, you lost so much. You know, you can lose your personality, your brain, your family, the loved ones, everything. And basically, and this is why this war is the lost war, because if you are part of this war where you are pushed into decisions where you don't take responsibility, you lose it at the end, you know. And I mean, this was also, in a way, this kind of perspective, this was the reason for this military kind of topic in a way. And and you know, it's in a way, it was and I mean, it is unfortunate coincidence. And then I mean, I'm talking about current political situation in the world. So it's really like, for me, it was really unfortunate coincidence, because I did it, you know, in advance before everything. And if you want to reflect it to war situation, you can reflect it to any kind of military conflict, First World War, you know, prehistoric wars, whatever. You are just a tiny mechanism that is put into tunnel, and you experience the hardship of just an ordinary person in a way. And then, you know, it's like, so the first bell was when a year ago, or a little bit more than a year ago, when there was this pull out from Afghanistan, and a Norwegian journalist wrote a book with the same name, Tapte Krigen. And I was like, shit, when my album comes out, people would think that this is related to the book. But, you know, the reality is actually even worse, right? Because when the album comes out with this title, and especially when the video comes out with this military, you know, topic, the person is running for another person, and it's also in Russian, and, you know, people started to react to this like, oh, this is like really directly related. I'm like, well, I wish it had no, it had no this coincidence, because simply it has nothing to do with any kind of political situation, because as I explained, this is much more on a personal level. I see the life, the transition, and just overall like view on societies, that people are often just pushed into tunnels without choice and burning out. And I mean, we also show it in this video, because in this video, I don't know if you had a chance to see it.
I have, and actually, I commented on it on the news rant, because I did interpret it exactly as you just said. Now, I think I might have made a comment and said, "Oh, I wonder whether this is a commentary on what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine."
No, not at all. Because I mean, there, if you watch carefully, it's more like there are two characters, basically two men there in the forest, right? And the one of them shoots the first one, and then kind of he takes off the masks. You see, it's the same face. So that was the idea, that basically you are hunting down yourself in this conflict where you are not owning your decisions, And then this guy at the end, he's buried alive in a coffin, because this understanding comes too late in life, that actually it's very difficult to start to own your own life, to own your own decisions. It's very difficult for a person, but then it's it's like you have to realize this at some point.
Yeah. So there's parallels to my own life and my own journey in that. And on last week's episode, I spoke about moving to the UK in 2002 from South Africa, and people have often asked me, what do you identify as? And I mean, there's no hesitation. I identify as South African. I've lived here for half my life. I can live here for fucking the rest of my life. I probably will live here for the rest of my life. I will always identify as South African. There's a very strong. I never felt that strongly about the country until I actually moved here, which is the irony. But I think as I grew older, I think I developed more of a connection to my past and to my heritage and my culture, and it's become very, very important to me. I mean, just as a side note, there was this whole big thing about a UFC fighter called Dricus du Plessis, who made a comment. So he's a white guy. Made a comment after his most recent fight, and he said, guys like Francis Ngannou, I think he mentioned Israel Adesanya. He might have mentioned somebody else. On real African fighters, I'm a real African fighter, and I'll be the first real African champion. And all of a sudden, people are like, "Oh, he's being racist. He's trying to erase these guys." And it's like, no, you fucking morons. If you understood where he's coming from, you will understand exactly what he means. He means he has a connection to Africa that those two guys do not have. He's from South Africa. He's from Africa. He feels like it's like you feel a connection to the soil. Like when I arrive back in the country, when I go on holiday, I feel alive in a way I don't feel alive anywhere else. That's the best way to describe it. But so I was curious to know because you were born in Russia, if I'm not mistaken. How old were you when you moved to Norway?
Well, I mean, it will be soon, 14, 15 years since I'm living here.
Yeah.
So I came when I was done with my university. But I mean, it's not about. It's like, for me, it's more like, it's not like I'm identifying myself as a Russian. It's like it's somewhere in limbo, in between, basically.
Yeah.
Because that's how it is. And I mean, it's probably, and research also shows this, that people that immigrated, they are kind of hanging in between, because you have been raised in one culture and then you change it, and then it's like you still,
Well, while the monarchy and the rebranded Democrats, also called the UK Conservatives, while they're in charge, I'll never identify myself as English, mate. Never. But no, the reason I ask is because I went through that phase as well, right? I did go through that limbo phase, and I think what I experienced as I grew older was that connection kind of back to the roots. And I'm not one of these people that don't assimilate and that doesn't want to speak to anybody who's English. One thing that I can't stand is my countrymen that come here and they kind of live this insular life, like they're trying to recreate South Africa in whatever fucking neighborhood and that's idiotic to me as well. But just it's a private thing obviously sharing it on the podcast, but that's a different story. But it's a private thing for me. It's something I keep quite contained and quite close. Except when I play it when it's time for the Rugby World Cup. It's a different story.
Okay.
But no, as I said, I was curious, just on your feelings of that transition, because it's similar to mine. You've been away from the place of your birth for a similar period of time to mine as well, and I was curious to see what your own journey there had been.
No, I mean, I can't complain, and I'm a Norwegian citizen, so there's I'm going to live here for the rest of my life if no atomic war would happen and things like that. But it's more like it's not really about being back to the roots. No, it's just simply that there are some things in your identity that you can't neglect, and that's it.
Yeah.
I just somehow unconsciously it came up when writing the lyrics, and I decided, okay, well, let's do it as a part of experiment, but also as a part of, I don't know, because I just felt I want to do it like this, and that's it.
Yeah. All right. So then we move on to where I feel like the record starts, where that gear shift starts. Yeah. So Vis Jech Bara Kuna is the next track.
Yeah. So
the longest song on the record as well.
Yeah, that's correct. But I mean, it's just 3 seconds longer than
exactly, but still technically the longest. So. But yeah, so tell me about the song.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is that, just on a side note, is that initially the track list was slightly different. And then when we already planned the physical release, I decided that we do a slight change, because initially the track number 7 was number 3 and this one was number 7. But then I thought that, okay, well, this would look more interesting in a way. And I think it was a good decision, because if you think about listening on vinyl, it's more like the side A, right? It has this Visia Kunde as the last one, which is a little bit more calm, right? Mm-hmm. And then side B starts again from Straight to Your Face, Meet the Stormen, like with very punchy, aggressive riff. So, and yeah, I think it all makes sense in the end. So basically, this type, the name of the track means "Oh, if only I could." And so musically, I think it's very interesting for myself, because it starts very relaxed in a way. And some people even say, "Oh, it's keyboards there." I was like, I don't have any fucking keyboards in my records. It's like it's just the guitars. And I mean, this is like, in a way, also a compliment to the sound producer that we worked with, that he made it sounding so organic that people start thinking, oh, it's keyboards there, no keyboards. So there's like this, in a way, slow build up. And then there's this cutting through tremolo fast part with and again with a rather relaxing end. So basically, lyrically, it's about being, and I mean, it makes sense in connection with the previous track. It's about being attached and looking for reasons and blaming for things in the past, being attached to things either you've done in the past or you experienced in the past, and holding that these things are not letting you go in a way. You are so attached to them that you are not able to see that, well, okay, this is past stuff. This has to be buried there. You need to move on. So, and it's about, oh, if I could forget about all this stuff from the past, what you have done, remember, and so on, and move on forward. Because only when you think about, okay, well, actually, past is past, you can't change it. But what you do today and what you plan to do in the rest of your life is actually going to be more important for you in the coming years. So basically, this is the lyrical idea in it. And basically, the last words are about, accept yourself and move on.
Is that connected in a way to the concept of the superego? Which and the reason I asked that is again, speaking quite openly, I went through a period of my life where I think a lot of my and I mentioned this earlier, obviously, as well, with when I said about think about what somebody was like when they were young. I went through a period of life where I held on to an extraordinary amount of resentment and grudges against various people and over various things. And I remember reading an article once about the superego and the degree to which it governs your decision making, but it very often is the result of you making or repeating mistakes because you think about entering into bad relationships, for example. You're entering into you go from one toxic relationship to the next because you're looking for a degree of validation that you failed to find in the previous relationship, and that is in your as the superego is dictating it is critical to your self-actualization, or you're the idealized version of yourself. And it's only when you recognize the pattern that you can actually effectively operate in a way that's counter to the superego. And again, if anyone who studied psychology is probably going to fucking rip me a new one here because I'm fucking this up. But you're getting the gist of what I'm saying. You can if you recognize the pattern, if you recognize the matrix in your own mind, then you can start operating against it, and you can consciously make decisions that are in your better self-interest. And that was definitely there's definitely part of my personal journey over the last 6-7 years, was getting to that place where I could recognize why I was making certain decisions and certain mistakes and, engaging in certain self-destructive behavior, and actually consciously make a decision to decouple from that, almost like you've just said now. It's a way to kind of let go of those things that, are steering you in a direction that is ultimately not good for you.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't. I don't know. It's more like it's not. Well, let's say it's partially personal, but also it's more like observatory. Because I read quite a lot on different aspects of human psychology and things like that. So it was more like, it's more like towards other people as well. Because it's you can say that many of those lyrics are about self-consciousness, about different aspects. And I mean, this is a lot about many people blame themselves, for things that have been done. But for myself, it's like something that we sometimes discuss with my wife is like, okay, well, obviously, if you made some mistakes in upbringing of kids, right, you can't really go back and correct this, if it's 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
If you want to make a positive change, it has to be done here and now, right? And the same can be transposed to any kind of, as you say, relationship, or if something comes from childhood, okay, let it go and move on, like let's find what was wrong there, dissect it and say, okay, well, this was wrong, and just find a solution for looking for like more positive things. Not attaching yourself to something that is negative, because this negative will just keep on being negative. Oh, things are so bad, it's bad. But it's more like, okay, well, if you just hand on this, everything will be bad, right? So then you need to look for solution on how to move on and accept things that, okay, well, this was not very nice, but okay, let's move on. Let's try to not do it anymore. Things like that.
That is also definitely, as a parent, I think one of the most terrifying things is, that I remember the second night that I had met her, I was holding her, looking down at her in my arms, and you realize I don't have an owner's manual for this. It's like it's one of the most frightening realizations. If you just bear with me 1 second, that racket in the background is the I think unintended co-star of of many episodes of the podcast now, the dog. So let me just make sure I let her in.
Sure.
Because she'll just never stop. So anyways, yeah, so I was saying, as I said, as a parent, that's definitely a really scary thought. The best analogy that I heard about parenting, or the best bit of parenting advice I ever got, was actually from reading Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, and he talks about raising kids, and the specific thing that he says is your job as a parent is to train your child to be an adult. because if you can train them, if you train them well, you save them from being trained by the world, because being trained by the world would be, you know, far crueler and far harsher than anything that you are able to do to them, you know, in terms of discipline and things like that, you know, within a reasonable, you know, within the bounds of reason.
Yeah, but I mean, then this would bring up the question: are you actually yourself an adult? You know?
Yeah, well, that's true as well.
No.
I mean, I think there's a great many people in society right now that get back to that emotional incontinence that I mentioned before, that aren't adults. They've never become adults, and they never will be. And sadly, they're having kids, and you know, God only knows what fucking craziness they are transferring across to the next generation.
Well, you know, I hope for the best. So I'm a little bit positive. You know, I've become a little bit more positive in the last 2 years, basically, with this kind of things. But yeah,
I often wonder, would I consider myself positive? I'm positive in my own life. I'm a life positive human skeptic, human cynical. So, all right. So then we move on to the song that you mentioned, and like I said, this is really kind of, to me, where the record is sort of switched gears, and it definitely feels a lot more aggressive. Mit Stormen is the next song.
Yeah, Mit Stormen. So here, basically, it's very interesting because, again, I wrote it together with my wife. This middle part, we basically, this was the start of the song. We wrote the middle part, and I wrote the words just on the spot, and then I created the rest. And so basically, the idea here is about parent-child conflict in a way. But I mean, between grown-up children and parents who are also adults, with how it develops, and that at some point it becomes too late. You know, there's nothing to fix, and people will go away, right? And it's about this, that this Mit Stormen is in the middle of the storm, but you will get this message when you are not prepared for it. And then it basically doesn't matter, you know, everything that was before becomes not valuable anymore.
You say the message as in it's when it's, you know, it's too late to reconcile with that parent, or it's
yeah,
too late,
like when you get a message that, you know, there's a serious diagnosis or whatever, something like this, then there's too late. And yeah, so basically it's very personal because it's related to my wife's mother.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I that's as I've grown older, I've become a lot more conscious that I was at a funeral, funnily enough, yesterday. And the person whose funeral I was at was the first person that I reported into in the company that I'm working in now. And she died in her, I mean, I think she was mid-50s, and she had a history of bad health. So, you know, it perhaps was inevitable. But it's still insane to see somebody that you knew quite well suddenly going to be there one day, and then the next day that they're not. And it does remind you again that, you know, whether it's relationships, whether it's just living life, generally speaking, there are absolutely no guarantees. You know, and I think, especially with my parents, my dad's quite sickly. You know, I've made a very conscious effort. I had a very complicated relationship with my dad growing up. I've made a very conscious effort as I've grown up to, you know, you kind of, I think as an adult, you learn that sometimes love is about actually choosing to love somebody. It's not just a feeling that you feel, and you always have to feel warm and fuzzy all the time. You have to learn, you have to choose to love somebody in spite of the things that you might differ about, or in spite of the conflict that you've had. Because at the end of the day, as you say, you know, something is going to come up at some point, and then all you're going to have is time for regret. You know, and no one wants to live that way. And I think just generally in my day to day, one of the things I make a point of doing is, you know, as much as I'm a human cynic, is people that I do appreciate, I think I feel that on a more, because I think about death and its consequences probably more often than most. I make a point of going out of my way to make sure the people that I do care about know I appreciate them, and also they know why I appreciate them. Whether that's to do with work, whether that's to do with my personal life, I just think that's very important. And I also think what you put out into the world is what you ultimately end up getting back.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see here we also like this musical video for this track. It was very good work. I mean, visually, it was made by this Russian director who is also doing videos for Draconian and a few other bands. And we talked about what we want to show there, you know, and she had like full artistic freedom in a way. We said, whatever you want, you film it the way you feel it, whatever you like, but this is what we would like, the emotions, you know, and the feelings, and this is what is the content of the lyrics and what the song is about. And I think she made a like outstanding, you know, the video is simply outstanding for me. It's breathtaking. It's like first, I don't know, 2 or 3 times I've seen it, I couldn't hold tears, basically, you know, it was so strong. How she made this, the color balance and everything, the visual, the imaginary that she made there, and also even the timing of music towards what she filmed there, like in the part where there's death knocking on the door, how it coincides with the rhythm of the music. It's so strong, in my opinion. So it was really like very, very strong video, which, yeah, I'm very, very happy with the outcome, basically. You know, it was like, okay, well, yeah.
I also think that must be super exciting as an artist when you know, if you're doing music videos and you give kind of creative control to somebody and they come back with a treatment that, you know, really nails it. It's a little bit like the album cover as well. And I spoke to Nassos from Vothroch the other day, and he was talking about Seth from Septic Flesh and the cover that he did for the Vothroch record. You know, and he was like, you know, they never gave him any direction. They just said, you know, do whatever you feel when you listen to the music. And he came back with this fucking incredible, you know, this like powerful, dark, you know, foreboding cover. Yeah, just as a side note, I think that must be an amazing feeling. Okay, so then next you've got, now this is probably the one I'm going to destroy most in terms of pronunciation, but Kare Barn.
Yeah, it's Shadebarn. Like it's
Shadebarn. Okay.
Yeah, it's a dear child, and this is very, very close, very important. I mean, it's like it's a little bit stupid to say this is a very important track because they are all very important tracks. But I mean, it's not because I'm arrogant, but it's just because it means a lot for me. So this dear child is the idea here with the lyrics is that basically you know, when we were waiting for our first child, I wrote a small poem which is like maybe eight lines, and then I was looking through all the things when we were moving, and I found an old box with, you know, different papers, and I found it and I was like, wow, this is very interesting because it shows me where I was, you know, 16 years ago, what I was thinking of, my expectations. And so I took this as a starting point. And then the lyrics are there are 2 messages there. First, there's a dialogue between me 16 years ago and me now. Like I'm speaking to myself back then, like, you know, because now I have the perspective that I didn't have before I had children. And then at the same time, it's also a message to my oldest daughter that was basically the part of the original poem that I wrote 16 years ago. And again, here I decided to use a little bit of Russian in the start, simply because, you know, it's not like, yeah, it's just like I felt it. Okay, I want to do this kind of declamation, like a poetry, started like spoken language, and then it jumps on the music. It was super funny because when I was recording it, you know, I'm recording vocals at home, and then I was done with it, and I came out, and my youngest daughter, she was laughing like really, like I was like, what the hell? And she was like, and she started repeating the words, and I said, well, wait a bit, you grow up, you would understand what I mean. Because now for you, it just sounds like my father is a stupid guy, you know. but when you grow up, you will get it. But then the oldest daughter, she was like, it's actually very cool that there's a song that is basically dedicated to myself. I said, yeah, well, okay, fine, enjoy it. Because
those words, I assume, are "don't buy crypto." It's the
no, but I mean, it's more about, and you mentioned this about raising your children as adults so that the world would not raise them, and it's partially also about this, that there's like it's more about I'm basically speaking to myself 16 years ago. Okay, you are acting like it's not very responsible in a way, because you don't get it manually, like you mentioned, right? You don't.
Yeah.
Okay, this is your child. Okay, what I'm doing now, right? And then basically your life is never the same after, right? It's totally different, and you don't know what you would be yourself, how this will challenge your personality, your, I don't know, your life, your job, your relationship. So it's like a Pandora box, right? So, and then there's a lot about uncertainties that await for you when you open the box, but also it's about the child saying that, okay, we take care of you and we do the best for you, but the world is not so kind as you might think of when you're a small child. And then musically, it's also like, I divide it into sections. And so it was funny because when I showed this track to my guitar player who was recording the guitar, and he said, well, actually, from the whole album, I really like this track most. I said, why? Well, and he said, well, it sounds like if My Dying Bride released on unreleased track. So, and I was like, okay, well, but yeah, I mean, okay, well, there's melody there that is harmonized in certain intervals that might remind people of My Dying Bride. And that's okay. I mean, I totally get it. And I like this. I mean, I don't mind about, making, in a way, I mean, it's not intentional tribute to My Dying Bride. It's more like I make it and then it sounds good. Like, okay, fine. Well, if it sounds a little bit towards My Dying Bride direction, I don't mind, because My Dying Bride is one of the, like, my top most important bands in my life, since I discovered them, and I really like what they do. And yeah.
What's your favorite My Dying Bride record, out of interest, or favorite three?
Oh, I'm really bad at naming there. I almost need to open the browser.
I was just about to say I have to do the same. So I've got
well, I mean,
I've got Metal Archive up here now.
It's a little bit difficult.
I mean, I know off the top of my head for sure which is my favorite, and it never used to be, but it has become over time.
Okay.
I think Songs of Darkness, Words of Light.
Yeah, it's really great.
Just fucking unbelievable. It is absolutely incredible from end to end. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that the Light at the End of the World, the Dreadful Hours.
Yeah.
These are the ones that are really big for me. And then Feel the Misery was also good, out of recent ones. But I mean, I discovered them like in 1995 when they made this The Angel of the Duck River. That was the first album I heard from them. And
yeah.
that was so fresh and cool, like, oh, what's going on, Because before My Dying Bride, I was only listening to like thrash and death metal bands. It was like first band, not first rock band, but first band with clean vocals that is playing heavy stuff. I was like, wow, that's something interesting going there with piano and violin and all that stuff. It's very, very interesting. So, and I'm a really big fan of what Aaron is doing as vocalist. So,
yeah, what's that? My bridge there was Paradise Lost, and they, because they would mention in those days Paradise Lost and My Dying Bride in the same sentences typically. There would always be like Anathema. Yeah, Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride. I immediately sought out Anathema and My Dying Bride as well. I like Anathema, but some of their later stuff I'm not such a big fan of. But then My Dying Bride I was always a big fan of. Huge fan.
Oh, yeah.
And I like the fact that they actually went the opposite route to everybody else and just got heavier over time. I mean, Field of Misery, for example, 2015, also an amazing record.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Songs of Darkness, Words of Light to me is like, that is the most perfect record that they ever wrote. It's unbelievably good.
Oh, yeah, it's a really good, yeah.
So, all right, then we move on to Loslat.
Yeah, Loslat is, it's a kind of funny song because I partially wrote it at night. Because, you know, it was not the best day. I clearly remember that. It was not the best day. I went to bed. I couldn't fall asleep. And so I took the guitar and I made this first riff, basically. And so in a way, it's a little bit closer to the first album, I would say. And also the guys in my live band, they also think it's a little bit like, let's say, from everything in this album, it's the closest to the first album because of this black and roll, whatever thing. And then, so musically it's quite fast and punchy with blast spades and all that stuff. And it ends a little bit harsh, in a harsh way, a little bit too quick. I think it was an angry metal guy. They wrote it. Oh, okay, there's like unclear, like that's the only critique why this track ends like that. But I mean, it's related to lyrical content. So basically, Loslat is like unchained or released free, basically. So it's related to, let's say, younger, stupid teenagers living in their parental homes, diving into life without any plan. And like it's related a little bit to conflict between parents and children as well. Like, you know, you're leaving the home because you want to be on your own and so on, and being stubborn and really like a little bit stupid and naive to be eaten by the life. And these are basically the last words there is to be grinded by this life. That's why it ends like this, really sharply, like it's time to be grinded.
And then the final track, Himmelen Italiengelach.
Yeah, I really like a Dutch. I really like a Dutch or Afrikaans accent.
That's why I can read it. That's the thing.
So Himmelen Italiengelach, it's like heaven is not available. If you don't mind, I need to send a message to my wife. Just sorry for that.
Yeah, no worries. She's calling you saying, "Hey, it's time to watch the next episode of Last of Us. Hurry up."
No, but it's pretty funny because, you know, we can talk about later. So this track is about. So it's also like into 3 different parts, with the middle parts with spoken language there, and again with using Russian, just because I wanted to do so. But basically the idea here is that the whole imaginary, or the whole idea or cliche or concept of heaven, right, is something that is waiting for you somewhere there, right? And I mean, it's in any religion, or even if you are not religious, you think, okay, there will be a better time at some point, right? Something is going to happen. I'm waiting for it, right? But the reality is that there's nothing there in a way. You know, your life is, it's again related to the other tracks. Your life is here and now, and you have to make your life here and now good, and not just wait for something, because while waiting, you're just wasting your time. Yeah. And then there's nothing there. And in this spoken part, there's like a little bit more like philosophical discussion there, in a way that, okay, and well, you are trying to, it's like Icarus, you know, this Icarus legend from like you are going to the sun just only to lose your wings and be blinded by the sun, and laying there in the dirt, you would see how the masses are still following this way, and they don't understand that this is not the solution for anything. They will all be defeated and lose everything. And so it's about this, about, you know, still similar to like the track Den Tapte Krigen. It's similar to this, with living with false goals, expectations, false expectations that something is going to happen, and at the same time something related to what you mentioned about this constant attention and pleasure seeking. People are so focused on that, you know, they are like, oh, you know, social media and everything, you know, this constant desire for reward and so on. And there's so much, and then they say, oh, there's so much stress and pressure and so on. And people start going to, I know, substances abuse, you know, alcohol, drugs, and so on, and all this stuff, just because they are looking for pleasures that do not exist, you know, just because they are waiting for something that is not going to happen, because they are not doing anything. So their heaven is not accessible because it doesn't exist. They have to work hard for themselves every day, basically, just, you know, to have an interesting life that is filled with something, filled with meaning, first of all, and not just wait for, okay, there's somebody there, be it God or society or government or, I don't know, neighbors that are going to make it nice, and you are just going to sit and wait with I don't know, with TVs and beers, and that something is going to happen with me.
With empty calories.
Yeah, maybe.
No, well, you actually, so there's a couple of things you touch on there. I think when it comes to religion, you know, as somebody who grew up amongst very religious people, I think the most destructive element about religion, and actually, I should preface this by saying, as I've grown older and I've been able to take a more nuanced view of religion. You know, I'm not like Nurgle, you know, who is just going to rail against religion for the sake of railing against religion. There are positives to it. The biggest negative to it, in my view, is that it takes people's eye off the problems and the issues in their own lives and in what's here and now, because, you know, in their mind, they go, exactly as you said, now something better is waiting for me. Doesn't matter if I'm in debt up to my eyeballs and I'm a fucking loser in life. You know, when I die, I'm going to heaven. And it is a psychosis that takes over their thinking to such a degree that they can excuse almost anything that goes wrong in their life, which is, you know, ultimately the cause of their, you know, or as a result of their own behavior and their own actions, because they're looking at this thing in the future. But then that concept of heaven extrapolates across to it seems to kind of be something that the masses continue to go after, even when religion in the shape that maybe you or I grew up with is no longer there, because the role of religion in society right now has been minimized, you know, exponentially. But what I feel has replaced it is far worse. You know, what has replaced it is the government, a bunch of wokery, you know, and just, I mean, I think the zero emissions agenda has replaced it as well to a certain degree. And so once again, they kind of keep chasing this religious ideal on something that I think is actually at its core even more vacuous, and perhaps you could make an argument to say even more sinister than religion ever was. So,
well, I mean, let's say there's nothing wrong in faith, you know, when people believe into something, it's okay.
Yeah.
But the problem is with religion, let's say, as an institution, because it's in a way legitimates, I mean, in the former days, the kings and their laws, right? And these days it can legitimate the governments or just, you know, some actions of people that are, and also give, in a way, false promises to the people. I'm more concerned about this, you know, that people are like living with false expectations. And I mean, I don't want to spend much time on religion. It can be government, you know, saying, okay, you work, I know, more hours and your pension retirement would be fantastic. Or, you know, if we
we'll soon find out that's not happening anymore.
No, or I mean, if you think like, okay, well, if you guys try harder and if you guys are going to, you know, starve more, then we will overcome this. Yeah, okay, but guys, actually, you have all the power to solve many things. Many problems can be solved by the bunch of rich people, right? Which are not really solvable by the ordinary person, and then they just put the blame on us in a way, right?
Yeah,
You
I was
can
about to say
take,
the burden often falls to the civilian or to the ordinary person. When, I mean, I would even go as far as to say sometimes it falls unfairly to people that within that construct have done reasonably well for themselves. You know, I'm not talking about the super rich, you know, like the
yeah,
Bezos level wealthy. I think again when people think about when you know when they cry out tax the wealthy or tax the rich, the people that ultimately get taxed are the people that are civilians that have done reasonably well.
yeah,
The people that are ultra wealthy, they don't feel it at all.
they don't
Which is
care.
why which is why they are perfectly willing to stand up in public and say, yeah, we should be taxed more, you know, we should be giving more. It's like you don't give shit. You don't give
Yeah,
anything.
exactly.
You just become richer and richer all the time, you know. And the money that you're supposedly giving away, I mean, I question some of that as well. I mean, a lot of that with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for example, that's just outright money laundering. But that's a you know that's for a different topic. But I
That's for a
definitely
different podcast.
probably yeah. I definitely think that I think the concept of religion has been co-opted by government, and it was especially clear after COVID that was the case.
Yeah,
You know, they started to. It's like any abusive relationship, right? You in an abusive relationship, typically what happens is incrementally your rights get taken away, and then they give you a little bit back. But the net effect is you now have, even when they give you something back, you have far less than when you started, and they make you start to feel like the ability to leave your front door is a luxury and not a
yeah,
right. And I think there's been a big encroachment in that over the course of the last couple of years, and very weirdly, it seems to have made people even more. They've become grateful for the slightest little scrap that gets passed to them from the table. I mean, you know, over here in the UK right now, we've got this this trove of text messages and stuff that's being leaked from the government where they were talking to each other during COVID. And, you know, there's evidence of them really kind of enjoying the fact that, you know, people were suffering and making jokes about people that, you know, had to come back and spend a stupid amount of money to quarantine in hotels, not really listening to any evidence that suggested that masking up doesn't work.
yeah.
You know, that the successive variants weren't as deadly as the first. Lots of things like that. And yet there's a YouGov poll that was conducted no less than a week ago, and 65% of people in the UK, for some inexplicable reason, feel like the government wasn't strict enough with COVID. So 2 years worth of intermittent lockdowns and clear evidence that much of what they did is a fucking waste of time and nonsense. They weren't strict enough. It's like you think to yourself, okay, so what do they have to do to finally break your trust? I mean, you again, it's no different again to the religious context, right? I've known people that the house will burn down, dog gets killed by by a fucking tractor, you know, dad gets mowed down by gunfire, and they just like, you know, God will provide. It's all in God's plan. It is brainwashing, and like I said, to me it's brainwashing along similar lines to what I saw in religion.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you know, in these days, it's like the mass media is basically doing the same kind of brainwash.
Yeah.
The
propaganda arm of the government.
Yeah, but also, you know, when people are kind of alienated against the religion, it's also part of this thing. You know, it's like just put in people like attention. Oh, these are the bad guys. Look at them. Like, okay, well, okay, but these are not the guys that actually take the decisions. Why should I blame somebody there? No.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to talk about is you mentioned the artwork earlier, and it is absolutely stunning. But I was keen to kind of get a sense from you as to where the concept came from, you know, what sort of went into the artwork, because you mentioned having some of this ready when you started shopping the record around as well.
Yeah, so basically here you see on the cover, you see those two beetles or two bugs fighting.
Yeah.
And this is related to this concept of comparing humans to insects, right? And then if you see that this is identically the very same bug, it's like it's fighting itself, or fighting, you can interpret it like it's fighting themselves, or it's fighting somebody who is just the same, you know, a different person, but kind of same level. And then on their backs, they have broken castles of dreams, ruins of their lives, and so on. So they are occupied with fighting with them, between themselves, why they don't see that everything is already broken, you know. So this is related to this the concept of this lost war, lost struggle in life, when you are pushed into goals that are not really necessary for yourself. And also related to this book, Life of Insects. And then inside inside the physical edition, like CDs, LPs, then there are more characters, more different insects like bees or different kinds of beetles, and with a kind of similar topic. They have either burning wings or broken castles and things like that on their wings, on their backs.
Where are the pentagrams and the inverted crosses, though? That's my question.
Well, it's probably, you know, on Photoshop you can make many layers, so it's probably somewhere burned there.
You can find it there somewhere. One last question, and then I'll let you go, because we've already gone over time. And by the way, what a refreshingly therapeutic conversation this ended up being. Playing live, I mean, obviously I know you've done some shows here and there. Are there plans to go out and play live with this album, you know, or even maybe go on like a small tour or something like that?
Yeah, so we play exactly in 1 month on the Prey Inferno Festival club night, actually, here in Oslo. Then we play in Trondheim in September. It's also in Norway. And then in October we are invited to Mexico. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to be fun. I've never been overseas, so
yeah. Oh, Mexico will be a blast, mate.
Yeah, I think so. It's just like, it just feels surreal for a moment, because you know, it just feels like, okay, well, I'll go to Mexico. I never thought about this. You know, it's like I never thought about being on Season of Mist, or, you know, making 2 good albums, or so. Being in Mexico is also kind of the same. Like, I never thought about this, so
yeah.
We'll see how it goes. If it happens, it's going to be fun. Yeah. But,
well, I mean, just playing Inferno is quite a experience in itself. I mean, the lineup this year is absolutely fucking nuts.
Well, it's not really the main. It's not the main festival. It's like pre-Inferno. It's like the night before Inferno.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that's why, for example,
it's still Inferno adjacent. And if I was,
it's adjacent to Inferno.
That would be enough for me.
I mean, it's really cool. And actually, you know, I was thinking just today actually about that, because there are many names on the main poster, right? And then like the smaller bands, they get to play like in the middle of the day in the smaller clubs. And then we also play in a smaller club the day before, but we play really late in the evening. And I was thinking of actually playing late in the evening on a Wednesday is better than playing in the middle of the day on Thursday. You know, so, and we will have a very, in a way, luxury situation, because we don't have a time limit. We can play as long as we want.
Yeah, and I would stick around until Sunday, when I can go and see Crowbar at 6 o'clock.
Well, you know, it's really funny, because on the very same day, I don't know who has organized this. It wasn't really smart for myself, I think. But on the very same day, on Wednesday, this Pre-Inferno Day, we also have, not related to Inferno, there's a show with Amen Ra, Igor, and Delvega Nefaihat, and Handman's Chair in a different club.
Oh, wow.
It's like overkill, you know, because already related to Inferno, there will be like our show, then there will be Imperial Triumphant playing in a different club, then this indie recording label night at the same time, and then plus this massive show with Amen Ra and Igor. It's like, okay, the booking guys really went crazy with this.
It's, yeah, definitely. just Amen Ra adjacent. You know, you talk about incredible records. That Absent in Body album that came out last year. Oh my God. I so hope that they carry that on without Scott, because just the I think it was 5-6 songs on that record. There's not a moment on that album that is not, you know, 10 out of 10 level genius. It's fucking incredible.
Well, it's really heavy.
I love it. Absolutely love it. My friend, thank you so much. What a pleasure catching up with you again. And you know, as I said at the start of the conversation, you know, congratulations to you. I'm so pleased for your success, and I am very glad to see people responding to this record as positively as they've done as well. You know, and hopefully I can continue to fly the flag on this podcast as well. It really isn't, and you know, it's two fantastic albums back to back that you've put out now. Expectations are riding high for album number 3. So.
Shit.
But we'll definitely do another one at some point soon anyway. You know, so we'll get you back on the podcast again in a while, and then we'll probably chop it up a bit about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. we'll go into all sorts of other crazy tangents, but take care of yourself in the meantime, my man.
Thank you so much.
All right, brother. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
That was Mit is Stormen by Bizarrekult off their new record, Den Tapte Krigen. It is available right now on Season of Mist Records. The record is absolutely ripping, and what an absolute pleasure having Roman on the show again. I think I said it to him offline, actually. I mean, the conversation actually surprised me with how in-depth we got, and it's a good example of how I think with the format of this podcast, when you have a guest on multiple times, a lot of the formalities and a lot of the stiffness of a new conversation where you're kind of trying to have a relaxed talk, but obviously, you know, people are still getting to know each other. You know, when that's away, that's when the real magic happens. So, you know, I'm conscious I don't want to keep repeating guests, but at the same time, you know, some of these folks I've kind of kept a relationship with, you know, once they've been on the podcast. You know, and there's quite a few folks that I'm, you know, pleased to say I regard as, you know, friendly acquaintances, or, you know, in some cases even friends. Yeah, Roman is one of them, and it was awesome having him on the show, and it's great to hear what he did on this Bizarrekult record, because I think it's such a huge leap forward musically for that band. You know, and I think that a lot of folks that if you haven't tried it yet, you are in for an absolute treat. Speaking of which, the Malign Covenant is the debut record by Verminous Serpent. It is available on Amor Fati Productions. Verminous Serpent, for those that move in our circles but have been living under a rock, is the new black metal vehicle fronted by Alan Averill of Primordial and Dread Sovereign. He is joined, for purposes of this record, by Joseph Deegan of Sladir, as well as Matt Bree of Malthusian. I think one of the first and most interesting elements of this record, as I understand it, this record was recorded essentially live in 2 takes, and then they chose the best take from each of the recordings or each of the sessions. 5 tracks across 40 minutes. It channels routinely the likes of early Dark Throne, early Celtic Frost and Hellhammer, Bathory, you know, stuff that you know will almost certainly have informed all 3 men's musical palettes, but delivered through the prism of, I think, their own creative leanings and their own style and their own sound. So as much as it has, on the surface of things, not a huge amount in common with Primordial, for example, or maybe even Dread Sovereign, you know, you can tell there's a definite Alan Averill signature to the way that he writes. And, you know, as somebody who loves that, I mean, you guys know my thoughts on Primordial and Dread Sovereign by now. It makes for 5 songs that, in my view, are probably 5 of the best that you're going to hear this year. Seraphim Fall kicks us off. It's a 7-minute long epic of just kind of grinding, doomy, black, gritty black metal. Ends off with this really cool kind of clean sung Merciful Fate sequence that really catches you by surprise, but you know, it's that sort of droning hypnotic element of the riffing on the song works an absolute treat. Transcended Pyre is track number 2, you know, far more aggressive, but you know, kind of still keeping that same hypnotic feel to it, you know, reminding me somewhat of early Burzum in that sense as well. Early Burzum records also had that ability to hypnotize you with its evil. And I think it all kind of builds up to this, you know, really incredible 13-minute epic that closes off that record, Death's Head Mantra, you know, where all of the elements that you heard, you know, in the build-up to, you know, this kind of finale, I think really come to a head and are once again deployed in epic fashion. It's hard to kind of describe this record as anything other than I've just said it. You know, we can talk in depth about, you know, some of the smaller touches here and there, and, you know, there are many little Easter eggs all over the place. But I think it is delivered with so much passion and so much attitude that it's very, very hard not to love this. So I'm not surprised that, you know, a lot of people that listen to this podcast were, you know, telling me about it, you know, before I even clocked onto it. You know, I was a few episodes behind listening to Alan Averill's podcast where he was talking about this. And so it was Carl Ikara and a couple of other folks that said, you know, have you heard this Verminous Serpent record yet? Not surprised people were excited by it, but I think the anticipation is probably going to be overshadowed is the right word. Overshadowed by the end result. The end result is absolutely sensational. If you're after something that is as rooted in the old school as it is forging a new way forward and delivering something that is just unapologetically dark, dank, mean, and utterly brilliant in 2023. This is an album you have to check out. The Malign Covenant, as I said, it's available on Amor Fati Productions, and I'm going to play a track for you right now called The Transcendent Pyre. The Transcendent Pyre by Verminous Serpent. The album is the Malign Covenant, a definite shortlist contender for the album of the year, in my opinion. And the race is hotting up, that's for sure. I'm going to play something at the very end of the show that I also think meets the criteria for that, which is coming out in April. So stick around for that. But yeah, great tune, great record. I highly recommend that you check it out. I will post a link to Verminous Serpent's Bandcamp in the description of the podcast, as always. So do go and check it out. And if you buy yourself anything, remember to tell Alan and the gang that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere that sent you. All right, my friends, if you think that Noam Chomsky is one of the greatest intellectuals in the history of mankind, then it's time for you to get to stepping, because this is my weekly news rant. We kick off as usual on Metal Storm, the best metal news website on the face of the earth, for my money. And the first headline is Sacral Night drop new official music video. It says here, French blackened heavy metal ensemble Sacral Night have launched a brand new official music video for the song L'Ode Infinity, or Infiny. Again, as I've said many times before, don't expect me to get these pronunciations right. I don't speak French. I also don't speak Spanish, as much as I wish I could, actually. Both languages I really like, but I'm mindful of the fact that I do butcher them on the podcast, many times over. But anyways, this is taken from their 2022 album, La Diadème d'Argent. I don't really know the record. Could it be that it's because it got lost in, an absolute storm of fucking great stuff that came out last year? We'll find out. This is Sacral Night with L'Ode Infiny.
La mémoire de nos vies, ce temps de poussière, frontières disparues, vaisseau immortel, regarde-moi.
I was a bit concerned when on the music video the singer came out wearing a cape. I mean, that to me is typically never a good sign. But I must say, the music is actually not half bad. I think blackened heavy metal is probably pretty loosely applied here. There are Nevermore songs that are probably as quote-unquote black as the song you just heard there. And they were hardly ever described as being blackened in any way. I feel like that word blackened gets thrown around an awful lot nowadays. But yeah, that being aside, nice melody, pretty catchy verse. I actually even don't mind those vocals. As much as I normally don't really like those high-pitched vocals, unless it's a Warrell Dane or somebody who is really unbelievably good at doing that. I'm not hating that whatsoever. Music video isn't too bad either. It strays away from the trend narrative at the moment of metal music videos, which, as I've said before, is typically some sort of old man running around bare-assed on the beach. Yeah, woman. I mean, for those not watching this on YouTube, it looks like the band on stage interspersed with black and white footage of a woman opening up some sort of Fritzl-like cellar. Anyway, right, let's get back to it. Yeah, not hating that at all. It would not have made the shortlist for my 2022 best albums, but I would not tell the person playing it to turn that fucking bullshit off if I were visiting their house and they played that. Generally speaking, you know, let's be honest, I'm not the kind of person who would impinge on somebody's music taste if I'm visiting their place. Myself and Paige, when it comes to our car arrangement, also have a deal. If she's driving, we listen to her music. If I'm driving, we listen to mine, which is why I tend to be the one who prefers to do most of the driving. Right, Silosis premiere a video for Deadwood single. It says here, UK Silosis, helmed by Josh Middleton, who also plays guitar for metalcore giants Architects, have revealed a video for their vicious new single Deadwood. The band's first new music of 2023 is a snarling cut of holistic savagery. I was a very, very big fan of Silosis's first record. I think it was called Conclusion of an Age. Because it kind of melded almost Emperor-like black metal with thrash and just did it really, really well. I remember that record coming out of nowhere and just really, really impressing me. And then beyond that, they've put out some good stuff, but there was never anything that caught me quite like that album again. So, to be honest with you, I've not really kept up to date with much of what they've been doing. Curious to know, obviously, what they've been getting up to. So, hence why I was attracted to that article. But it says here, Mastermind Josh Middleton comments, we've never pushed so hard to create something as special as this new music. Deadwood is the first taste of what is to be a very year of Silosis music. More news to come. Our focus is to write the best modern metal, and it's very exciting to see a new scene of metal fans and bands emerging for all of us to keep developing and growing. Right, let's cut the preamble and get to the music. I don't know who's who in the band. I assume Josh Middleton is the front man. He sounds an awful lot like Corey Taylor on that verse. I think if you close your eyes, if you played this to, you know, somebody who is vaguely familiar with Slipknot, I bet you they'll tell you, oh, is that the new Slipknot? I don't mind that opening riff. That reminds me a little bit of either Exodus or Testament. So definitely a bit of an old school thrash influence coming in here. The Corey Taylor verse, I can see that it would appeal to a certain kind of listener. You know, I think if we're honest, the kind of the sort of cut through average metal listener loves this sort of thing. You know, youthful Sturm und Drang, and it's not. You know, it has its place for sure. I'm somebody who's, you know, unashamedly bought into a lot of stuff like that, where, you know, or if you were to be a critic or an elitist, you would say, oh, this sucks, but there's just something about it that's great. But for me, this song, it's all right, but it's not, I'm not nearly as excited about it as I was for Silosis' first record. And I feel like there's something, there's an originality. There's just something here that's lacking. I don't know what, I can't put my finger on it. We're only 50 seconds in, might change. But yeah, so far I'm a bit indifferent to this, and I guess maybe that's probably the worst thing you can be, is indifferent. I mean, I don't hate it, I don't love it either. But all right, let's get back to it.
Face down in the dirt again. What's the gain from being the last one standing? Cut the limit of the tourniquet, so now it's understood. We remove the dead word.
I'll just say, because we're back into that verse again, now we understood, now it's understood, we remove the deadwood. That section I thought was the best part of the song by far. I actually, could quite enjoy that. I like the differences I like the different approach to the vocals. I liked the melody. I thought that part was catchy. It was heavy. It was aggressive. It worked really, really well. And that's where some of that originality that maybe was missing for me in the verse, where that kind of snuck in. So we'll give it another 30 seconds.
So like the fucking match, never been the first to cast a stone, but will towards the field with their seeds are sown. Like moss to flames, they harbor the arcade, constricting, complicit in our decay. Face down in the dirt again. Once the game from being the last one standing, come the limit of the decay. So now it's understood, we remove the deadwood.
Yeah, not bad, not great. Nothing to write home about. I mean, I can see these, this sort of band going over extremely well on a festival stage. Most likely if they play middle of the afternoon at Download, people are going to go ballistic, especially after a couple of beers. And good on them. I mean, bands definitely need to be stepping up and trying to make up for the fact that, Metallica, Iron Maiden, those bands are going to be retiring pretty soon because there's nobody to take their place. I mean, if you think about the next tier below them, there's Machine Head, there's Lamb of God, but those guys are, all in their 50s as well. So, I mean, again, how long do they still have, or how much runway do they still have? Likewise, how many people are they going to be able to attract to a festival or to a show relative to a Metallica or an Iron Maiden? And then below that, you've got Behemoth, maybe Mastodon, but again, not bands that I could see, selling 80,000 or 90,000 tickets to the Download Festival. So, and folks that maybe are listening to this podcast and share similar taste of music to me might look at that on the face of it and go, well, I don't give a shit because, I listen to Panzerfaust and I listen to Ecclese and I listen to Inferno and Runes of Beverast, and, the day that they sell 90,000 fucking albums but is the day that we need to start watching the apocalypse for the fucking 4 horsemen of the apocalypse too. So we need to watch for the horsemen of the apocalypse skirting the horizon. But the thing is, there is a bit of a trickle down effect there, and I think there has to be an opportunity for bands to at least make a living out of doing this. Otherwise, you're just going to get less bands being attracted to it. Maybe not in black metal so much, because obviously a lot of black metal is basement black metal that we all love, but there's a subsection, I think, of a lot of the music that we listen to. Alan Averill talks a lot about it on his podcast as well. You have to be able to attract bands to be able to enter the enter music as a full-time profession, and I think that if there's not an economy that is created by the bigger bands, I don't necessarily see that being something that would stay feasible for very much longer, right? If there's no Metallica, if there's no Iron Maiden, if there's no Slipknot selling those, selling out those big festivals eventually just won't happen anymore, or they'll just be scaled down to much smaller venues. If they scale down to much smaller venues, there's less opportunities for bands to get on those bills. But anyway, not to take us too far off the too far off piece, but I just thought I would share that as kind of a side note. But yeah, like I said, Psilosis, 5 out of 10. Vredensdal is a band I have not been indifferent about. We listened to the first single off of this new record, Sonic Devotion to Darkness, which is out on March the 31st. Loved the first single. Swapped I Blut is the third and final single from this record, and it is described here as raw, catchy black metal from the US of A, with this track sung in Norwegian tongue. And a reminder that Sonic Devotion to Darkness drops on March the 31st, and I will have Michael on the show at some point. I've got as I mentioned last week, I've got a bit of a backlog. In fairness, Michael is part of the backlog. I just need to get everything scheduled and done. But it will be done, and he will come back on at some point to talk about this record. So far, so good on the singles that he's released as well. So let's see if this young buck has managed to keep up the pace. This is the kind of song that I feel fills in the void that was left by Satyricon when they decided to, or when Satyr decided to become a poseur on that last Satyricon abortion. That is really, really, really good. Interesting way to get the song started. You know, I kind of let it go for a little longer than I normally would singles when I'm listening to it on the segment, but when it kicks in, it's fucking badass. I mean, it sounds nasty. It sounds menacing. I like the fact that it, you know, doesn't immediately go into blast beats. I love that, you know, sort of galloping groove that you've got going there. Michael sounds great on the mic. The drums work really, really well. I think this is excellent. I mean, again, you know, he's not somebody that makes any bones of the fact that he's very heavily influenced by Norwegian black metal. You know, he wears his influences on his sleeve, but he translates it into something that always comes across as uniquely his own, and I love that. I love it for that very reason. So this is another thumbs up for me. Very, very excited now to hear the full record. Let's give it another minute. Just one thing I want to say, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I love that chug that he does with the guitar. Like, I've heard him do that on a couple of songs, and generally speaking, I love it when bands do that. Period. But that it's fucking great. Just that it's like a slight variation on what a lot of other bands would do, but it just, because it's slightly different. And because it's that, like I said, because it's that chug, it just sounds so fucking nasty and mean. I love it. I love it. All right, back to it. That is fucking awesome. As we're talking about backlogs of guests, so 2 guests that I need to get booked in. Actually, one is booked in, one is due to be booked in. Some of you have been asking when Marco of Stellar Master Elite is going to be back on the podcast. I mentioned him because I got a message on Friday demanding whether, and I quote, "Have you listened to the new DHG African?" or South African, as I see the headline here, Dodheimsgard reveal Abyss Perelian Transit single. We'll listen to that in a second, but yeah, he'll definitely be on the podcast again at some point soon. Another guest that I've had on before, who's definitely due back another visit, is Nars Alchemeth of Ecclese. So he and I have spoken. We're going to record something in the next couple of weeks, especially in light of the absolutely egregious hit piece that was run on Ecclese in the Guardian newspaper, which, I mean, I've mentioned before on this podcast, and I'm sure everyone listening to this would agree, is complete and utter trash. If you believe a single word that's written in that newspaper, you need to have your fucking head read. But it now seems that Ecclese has run into some challenges as far as being able to tour in Scandinavia as well. Partly because of the furor kicked off by this article. So we're definitely going to talk a little bit about that. I have to say, you know, and I'm going to put my hands up here and say one thing that I was wrong about. Over the course of the last 2.5 years, when we've spoken about this movement to cancel bands in the metal scene and the black metal scene in particular, you know, I've made the argument before to say, in an ideal world, what we should be doing is just ignoring them and kind of marginalizing their voices and just carrying on with things and forging our own path. And I have to say, increasingly, I'm starting to come to the realization that that is naive thinking. And really, you know, what we have been doing thus far, really, for the most part, is actually trying to ignore them. And that's not really helped. It's not gotten us anywhere. We clearly have this element within the metal scene who exercise a degree of just extremely hypocritical selective outrage. There are certain bands that get a pass for certain behavior. There's other bands that, you know, when there's even something slightly you know, out of place or out of line with the way that they think about things, then immediately that band is cast as National Socialist black metal or you know, white supremacist music, and then they dunk on and in many cases, I believe, punch down on the band until that band is you know, persona non grata in the in a sense with you know, with venues and with shows and things like that. Now, I think we need to start to quite aggressively push back against these people, and you know, by aggressively, I'm not saying, you know, go and beat the guy up, but I do think, you know, kind of draw a line and say, we've had enough of your shit, shut the fuck up and get lost. I think where it starts is, I think promoters need to sack up, you know, and when they do come under attack by some of these people, they need to do what Direct Touring did in Australia when you know, they came under fire over putting on the Mayhem tour recently. And that is to tell these people to go pound sand. You know, these are the very same people that want to use the argument of, you know, letting parents decide what their kids are exposed to when it comes to defending, you know, drag queen story hour and shit like that. But, you know, they will be the ones that say, you know, you're not allowed to go and watch a band because we disagree with what the band has sung about. And I mean, the irony with Ecclese is, they have never once sung about anything remotely political. They've never once made a, you know, remotely political statement in any, you know, by any stretch of the imagination. Most of this all goes back to, and literally the only thing that they seem to keep harping on about is the fact that, you know, Nightbringer, Nas's other band, used a Julius Evola sample. And like I've said before, if that's the, you know, if we're going to go by that standard and that logic, then, you know, we need to cancel Paradise Lost for using Charles Manson. We need to use, you know, cancel every single one of the myriad bands that have used Charles Manson samples. We most certainly need to get rid of and expel every single one of the bands that have ever shown a slight interest in Che Guevara and fucking, you know, communism, because we all know Che Guevara lined gay people up and shot them in the back of the head, thought they were worthless. You know, openly, you know, advocated, you know, really, really vile racist views. So you can't be selective with this outrage. If you're going to apply a standard, apply it to everybody. You know, you guys know my views on certain things. You know, for example, people have asked me, you know, to get Miko Asper on the podcast. I would never, ever do that. And part of the reason why I wouldn't do that is because I read an interview with this guy where it seemed to me like he thought it was cool that, you know, the pornographer Max Hardcore played a song during a scene with a girl who had shot herself, basically making light of the fact that she'd committed suicide. And I thought that was completely and utterly fucked up. And I think that people that think that way, in my view, deserve to be fed to the lions. That being said, if you like Miko Asper and you like fucking, you know, any of the bands that he's been a part of, go ahead and be my guest. You're not forcing me to listen to it, and I'm certainly not going to force you to abide by my opinion. So anyway, I'll talk about that in more detail with Nas when he's on the podcast. But like I said, I think the time to sit back and let these fools dictate to us what we can and can't do, I think is pretty much done. I think we've been tolerant for long enough, and I do think unless we start actively pushing back and actively saying, look, you're entitled to believe what you want, you're entitled to abstain from watching a band or from listening to a band if you don't like them, if you don't enjoy their music, but I'm an adult, I can make my own responsible decisions, and I'm not going to have you dictate to me what I can and can't do. So get fucking bent. So yeah, I think until we do that, it's just going to get worse. It clearly trying to marginalize and ignore them is not helping. That brings me to Dodheim's God. not really connected, but anyways, it says here, Abyss Perillian Transit is the newly released advanced single from Dodheim's God's oncoming studio album, Black Medium Current, out on April 14th, 2023 via Peaceful Records. It has premiered online in the form of an animated video clip. I know their last record came out back in 2015, and I mean, people generally speaking absolutely loved it, so I'm sure there was a very good reason why Marco was so excited. I've not listened to the song yet, so I don't know if it's any good, but we're about to find out. It says here, frontman Vikotnik had the following to say: the whole album revolves subjectively around perception, experience, psychology, objective or subjective reality versus external pressure, tropes, taboos, the laws of motion, causality, which influences one's life. The subject of perception of reality versus the objective causal effects of reality and how they are bound to interact. Epistemological dualism, I guess mental health, or rather, instead of health, let's call it mental condition, is a big topic on this record. Not as in a complaining way or as a good or bad notion, but rather a subject's study of his own psychology enduring everything. So anyway, heady intellectual topics combined with music, which we're about to find out what it sounds like now. So let's get on with it. That like high-pitched scream that they added to the vocal tracks there at the end, it sounded a little bit like somebody's demented grandma falling down the stairs. I do like what I'm hearing musically though. It sounds very cinematic, I'd say, the music. Very cinematic, very atmospheric. It is an 11-minute long song, so I think maybe let's jump to minute number 6, so we kind of get it just past the halfway mark. And let's hear what they're up to. This is, long songs like this aren't necessarily the best for the format that we follow on the news rant, but we'll have an idea of what it sounds like if we give it a listen across those 2 checkpoints. that melody is fucking incredible. That is so cool. Again, still quite cinematic, I think. Also reminds me a little bit of Radiohead for some reason. Which again, I'm not. I don't make any bones about it. Radiohead is one of those bands where when things work, when all of their best elements come together, they are fucking sensational. There's a lot of bullshit in their back catalog, but there's a lot of gold as well. But yeah, like I said, that kind of has a bit of a Radiohead vibe to it. But yeah, like it. I think it's very, very good. Speaking of movies, by the way, it was the Oscars over the weekend. For those that aren't keeping score, it's been a long time since the Oscars have meant anything to me. Although, yeah, about maybe 15, 20 years ago, it used to actually be a time of great excitement because it was, always around Oscar season when all the best movies came out, and invariably you'd have movies like Traffic, No Country for Old Men, There'll Be Blood. I'm just thinking of the first stuff that comes to mind getting nominated. And you could always be guaranteed there was going to be at least, maybe out of the 5 movies nominated for Best Picture, at least 3 of them were going to be worth watching. So anyways, this year, Everything Everywhere All at Once won Best Picture. Got to say, I'm not surprised in woke Hollywood that would be the case. I myself thought that movie was pretty dull. It's a 6 out of 10 film. It's at least 40 minutes too long. It's got a couple of interesting ideas, but I think it outweighs it. The card that's up its sleeve, it plays, and then it plays and plays and plays it again for the entirety of the film. I also think the ending is just way too saccharine and dragged out. So yeah. Not unsurprisingly, I don't agree with their selection. I would have probably given the award to the film which won Best International Picture, All Quiet on the Western Front, or to Banshees of Inisherin. That being said, the point also needs to be made that the fact that Mia Goth was not nominated for Pearl renders the entire ceremony moot. Whilst we're on the topic of entertainment, though, I wanted to talk a bit about The Last of Us. So I finished watching The Last of Us, done with episode 9, so full season finished. I might actually get my friend Lo Reichert, who you guys will remember I did the Woodstock 99 episode with. I might get him to come on the podcast and we can do like a proper discussion of The Last of Us. But I have to say, I like the season. I like the I like the adaptation. I think it's very, very well done. The one thing that I thought was very weak was the finale. Not necessarily because of anything to do with the plot. I mean, I knew what to expect because I've played the games many times over, and I think the plot is great, so I don't mind that. I think where it fell down for me actually was in the direction. There is for those that haven't seen it yet, I'm not going to give away anything about the story, but there's a part in the last episode which, when you play the game, is really tense. Very action packed, and they kind of directed it like a bit of a montage. There's just no tension there. There's the action feels really flat. So the whole thing kind of just feels very, like it's running on a very flat line, if you understand what I mean. Which I think was a big missed opportunity. I think that would have been a great. I mean, it was a reasonably short episode too, like I think 47 minutes long. So by comparison to some of the other episodes, it's too short anyway. But you could have made that episode a little bit longer and focused on building up some more of that tension and on making that a really kind of gritty, violent gunfight the way that it's presented in the game. Now, that being said, when we were done with Last of Us, Paige and I were wondering, what do we watch next? I'm 2 years late to the party. I know this, but we watched Squid Game. Oh my God. Fucking believable. If you have not watched it yet, then as soon as you're done with this episode, cancel your plans for the rest of the week and get on that shit. Make sure you watch it in Korean with the English subtitles, because I think it would lose something in the translation. But Jesus Christ, it is good. It's a complete and utter masterclass in storytelling, a masterclass in direction, a masterclass in acting. We got to episode 6, and we've actually finished all 9 episodes now, so I know what happens. We got to episode 6, and there's a particularly emotional moment in that show. And I turned to Paige and I said to her, like, this is television production at the very, very highest of levels. You know, you're talking about levels that are like Sopranos level or The Wire level, or Mad Men. It's just on another fucking planet whatsoever. You know, I cannot, you know, if I cannot find the words, as you can clearly hear, to recommend this more highly. So if you've not watched Squid Game yet, make sure that you do. I don't know why it took me so long. I think part of it was the resentment of the fact that I've been a fan of Korean horror for a long time, and everyone was suddenly acting when that show came out like, oh, it's this cool new thing. So maybe it was a reflexive, you know, rebellion to not getting into something that, you know, the mainstream was too excited about. But I have to tell you, you know, fuck all that shit. Just make sure you watch it. It's really, really, really good. Very violent as well, which, you know, typical of Korean. There's two things about Korean cinema and Korean now television production that I really enjoy. And one of them is there is a cultural element to the way that they write characters. So they don't necessarily follow the same logic that the average Westerner would follow, and therefore, because of that, the story does tend to always wind off into, you know, different directions, maybe to what we're used to seeing stories go. And then the other thing is the way they present violence and the way they present gore is always unflinching. It doesn't ever feel necessarily gratuitous, but the issue that I've always had with a lot of gore and a lot of violence in, you know, especially on like stuff produced in Hollywood, is that sometimes they can present it, and this is why I don't like horror comedies either. Sometimes they can present it as being quite, like there's no consequence for it. There's never a seriousness. There's never a weight to the violence. You know, now this is not true of everything, right? I'm just saying sometimes this happens and I don't like it. But I've not seen an Asian horror movie yet, and maybe this is just because of this what I've selected to watch, but I've never seen an Asian horror movie where the violence doesn't have genuine, like it's got a genuine sort of weight to it, as it hits you emotionally as well as viscerally. You know, and I think of some of the best stuff I've seen from there, like Old Boy, A Tale of Two Sisters, Bedeviled, you know, stuff like that. It always. It can get really violent, but it always has purpose. It always has, you know, an intensity to it that I just think is absolutely sensational. No different on Squid Game. Anyways, right, let's get back to music. And Cutted Flesh are streaming a new track. Now, I recall Cutted Flesh putting out a record in 2021, which I quite liked. I think it was called Sharing is Caring. And they reminded me a little bit of Benighted, if Benighted were less focused on technical stuff and more focused on songwriting. So not bad at all. I also noticed in the bottom corner the Transcending Obscurity logo, and like I've said before, that's a label that's fast becoming one of my very favorites. So a definite must listen. It says here, The Symptoms of Parasite, a brand new preview tune from Cutted Flesh's next full-length effort. Details yet to be disclosed, has surfaced online. Recorded in Cole Keller Studio by Christian Cole and Kai Stallenberg. Drums recorded by Thomas Schmeiser. By the way, Parasite, another Korean movie that if you've not seen it yet, you are a disgrace to your family and you need to watch it immediately. But anyway, let's listen to The Symptoms of Parasite. Fuck me. That is fucking excellent. I mean, heavy as shit, groovy as a fatso excited about all-you-can-eat pizza, Pizza Hut. Great vocals, thick, nasty production. I like the fact that there is, I mean, I was talking earlier about, the word blackened being thrown around like, some folks on YouTube throw around the word phenomenal. But yeah, no, I mean, the blackened description, yeah, definitely fits. But yeah, this is absolutely fucking sensational. Let's get back to it. This is fucking spectacular. I no other words for it. That is spectacular. And as we've hit pause there, it's just had another gear shift, and it sounds even more fucking grim and badass. Now, the gentleman from Cutted Flesh, I tip my hat to you. That is really, really, really cool. And once again, the folks over at Transcending Obscurity knock it out of the park. I mean, think about the bands that we've heard of them recently. Divenial Verdict, Veilburner. We were listening last week to Burial Hordes, which, aside from those vocals, the music was absolutely, 11 out of 10. And then we've got this. Really, really, really good. Very much looking forward to the when that full length comes out. All right, let's move on. Pupil Slicer. This is a band. So Pupil Slicer has been recommended to me by a couple of people, specifically Gavin McKinnelly, the promoter at Damnation Festival. He was on the podcast, as some of you will recall. He also does his own podcast, Damnation Versus. I don't think he's done an episode in a while, but he's a fantastic guy. I must admit, I love his accent. Part of the fun of having him on the podcast, I can just listen to him talk. I mean, he could be talking the biggest load of bullshit, but it would be fun to listen to because he just sounds like such a great dude when he speaks. But anyways, yeah, he's a big fan of Pupil Slicer. I've never heard of them before. They're on Prosthetic Records, who also happen to be housing the greatest death metal band of modern times, Werewolves. So I'm willing to give it a listen. It says here, as part of their forthcoming studio record, Blossom, Mathcore operatives Pupil Slicer now stream a David Gregory produced or directed music video for the title song. The 10-piece music output was produced and mixed by Lewis Johns, mastered by Grant Berry at Fader Mastering. Official release date June the 2nd, 2023 via Prosthetic Records. So, right, my first taste of Pupil Slicer about to happen right now. I mean, it's not outright muck. I'll start with what I like. I think the drummer is very good. I think I like this the sound they got when they were recording this. I think the production on the drums sounds great. I think the singer isn't bad. Both her screaming vocals and her singing is not bad, but the music just sounds to me to be all over the place. There's kind of a lack of dynamic in the music, and it feels like they've stuck together a bunch of riffs, but there's nothing that really feels to me like it. You know, when maybe verse changes into bridge or changes into chorus, there's no real oomph. I don't know. This is always the thing when you do these kind of immediate reactions. You don't always necessarily know how you want to express how you feel, but I think you guys know what I'm driving at. There's just like I don't know. There's just not something that's grabbing me and making me go, yeah. You know, I'm trying to think of what's a great chorus. I'll tell you what's a fucking great chorus. You know what I've been massively into recently is like 70s music, and sometimes I'll just put on like I'll be driving in my car. I've got Android Auto, and I'll just say hey Google, play Deuce by Kiss or something like that, and then I'll just let it play on, and it'll go through the litany of 70s greats, Black Sabbath, Motorhead, UFO, stuff like that. Deuce by Kiss is such a fucking cool tune. Deuce and Cold Gin both. Both of those songs have incredible choruses, and both of those songs kind of highlight for me what's missing from a song like this is that dynamic. It doesn't have to be the most brutal thing. It doesn't have to be the heaviest thing. It's just that kind of something, that kind of punch that comes through when the song changes tact, when it goes from verse into chorus or verse into bridge. So like I said, there's positives here. I can definitely see that a lot of people would be a big fan of this band. They're just not my thing. So let's move on. What else have we got to listen to? I'm also conscious time is ticking on, and there's only so long. I no doubt that you guys are going to want to hear me ramble. Necrofier are ready to release their new record. It says here, Texan black metal outlaws Necrofier will be releasing their second full-length, Burning Shadows in the Southern Night, on June the 2nd, 2023, via Season of Mist Underground activists. Alongside unveiled details, the band is now sharing the vicious new single Burnt by the Sacred Flame, along with a music video. The record was recorded and mixed at the legendary Studio G in Brooklyn by engineer, producer, and musician Joel Hamilton. Mastering handled by Mayor Applebaum at Mayor Applebaum Mastering. Christian Larson of Necrofier fame, of course, has been on this podcast twice. He will almost certainly be on the podcast a third time, pending how much I like this song. But no, he's a fucking great dude either way. It's always fun having him on the show. So no doubt he will be back on again. I really liked the last Necrofier record, Prophecies of Burning Darkness. Prophecies of Eternal Darkness, I think it was called. I did think it was at its best when they kind of colored outside the lines of their influences. And, I know he's very massively influenced by old school heavy metal, by bands like Dissection. And it's great. And for the most part, I mean, that album is solid from start to finish, but it goes up several gears when they kind of do something a little different or a little more, what you get the sense is maybe more musically challenging for them. So curious to hear what they're doing on the new record. Obviously, Christian mentioned it the last time that he was on the podcast. I'm surprised it's coming out as quickly as it's coming out, but strike while the iron is hot. Obviously, they've just been on tour with Danzig. There's almost certainly going to be a reasonable amount of momentum coming from that. I'll also say, just as a side note, looking at the album cover, it looks absolutely fucking badass. Love it. So, right, let's hear what the first single off the new Necrofier record sounds like. I know I let that one run on a little bit longer. That's because I was getting really into the song. Also, visually, I like the music video. You've got skulls, you've got nakedness, and you've also got what looks like a real kind of VHS type aesthetic, which I think looks very, very cool. But I think that song is really, really good. I think it hits exactly the right beats that I would have wanted Necrofier to hit on the follow-up to that last record. And I would actually say, interesting that I had mentioned the coloring a little outside the lines. This song to me feels a bit blacker, for lack of a better word, than the stuff on the previous record in the main. So I feel like Christian has kind of leaned into that side of what they do a bit more than he had done on the previous record, and it sounds better for it. His vocals also sound very good. I think he and I actually touched on his vocals when he was on the podcast last time round. Whatever he's done, or maybe it's just the fact that he's been on the road, playing that kind of music, or doing that sort of vocal on stage, and it's made him a little more match fit. But he sounds like a fucking $1,000,000. So yeah, top notch stuff there. Let's give it another minute. I'm thoroughly enjoying that. I know I actually have the promo for Burning Shadows and This Other Night in my inbox, so I may be giving that a listen. I'm actually traveling this coming week, so I'll give it a listen when I'm on the plane. All right, let's listen to one more, and then we'll head over to the Blabbermouth's Guide to Rock Music. Heritoire, not a band that I really know, but interesting name, so I thought, let me check them out. It says, yeah, black metal bringers Heritoire are proud to unveil their first single video, Anima, of their forthcoming EP release, Wastelands. The latter drops on the 19th of May, 2023, via AOP Records. Like I said, don't know them. Music video looks like it could be potentially interesting based on the thumbnail. Name sounds interesting, so let's hear what it sounds like. This is the kind of music that would have gotten you'd have gotten your ass beat for listening to this in Norway in the early 90s. That's for goddamn sure. I mean, they don't do the whole kind of major chord vibe quite as overtly and as disgracefully as Dawn of Ouroboros did when we listened to that last week. But there's just something that's not offensive enough to me about that verse. I think the oh, sorry, not the verse, the chorus. The verse, I think, is pretty good. I like the guy's vocals. When the clean singing starts, I mean, it's kind of, I would say, black metal bringers. You're using that phrase very, very loosely indeed. Yeah, I mean, black metal is, it's open. We celebrate all the time, you know, the freedom that the genre affords us, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. That it's just not. It's not my kind of black metal. That you know. Maybe if you think that you know, the new In Flames is a wonderful record, you're going to think that that's great. Or maybe you thought the new Arch Enemy was album of the year. Then maybe that's the band for you. Maybe it's a gateway for you to get into black metal. But it's for a you know, someone who is as long in the tooth as old Smith over here. I'm not sure that quite works. Okay, we move on to the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music. Motorhead's Phil Campbell, Mickey D, and I didn't have a chance to say goodbye to Lemmy before he died. In a new interview with Robert Cavuto of My Global Mind, former Motorhead guitarist Phil Campbell was asked if he and his then bandmates knew things were not going well when they were forced to cancel a number of shows due to Motorhead frontman Ian Lemmy Kilmister declining health in the months leading up to his death. Phil responded, yeah, we knew, but Lem just wanted to carry on. I know the last tour in Germany, I think 1 or 2 of those shows were cancelled because I ended up in hospital and I came back out. We finished the tour, and that was the tour then. The last show was in Berlin. So the last week of Motorhead, actually, I was the one in bloody hospital. But we never thought, when we parted at the end of the tour, we never thought that would be the last time we'd see each other. We didn't have a chance to say goodbye, me or Mickey or nothing. I couldn't even go to the funeral because my doctor advised me not to because I was pretty ill myself in them days. Sad stuff. I did see an article on another website where they spoke, I think it's probably off the same interview, they spoke about how Lemmy would not have appreciated the political correctness in the era now, and I do agree with that as well. Again, though, comes back to that selective outrage that I mentioned before. A lot of these folks that are demanding that certain bands be cancelled think nothing of celebrating Motorhead. But, I mean, you know, let's call a spade a spade. You know, the guy had a very deep fascination with World War II memorabilia. Nothing wrong with that. You know, but they certainly toyed with some of the iconography. Again, from my perspective, artistic expression, he can do what he wants. And I think he's a badass guy, you know, awesome band. And I've got no issue with it, but you're not going to convince me that you know, a band like Ecclesiastes needs to be cancelled over fucking a Julius Evola sample, but you let other things just have a pass. You know, it's like we were talking a while back about what was when I had Mike Hill on the podcast, we were talking about the selective outrage that's applied when it comes to, you know, guys that are found guilty of or land themselves in hot water with domestic issues. And then you go, okay, so it's one thing to condemn those people and, you know, cancel them. That's fine. But then what about people like Ozzy Osbourne? What about people like Axl Rose, you know, who have, you know, been known to get a little handsy with their partners? Something I absolutely don't condone whatsoever. I think it's a fucking disgrace. But if you've dealt with the matter in your, you know, within the bounds of your own home, and, you know, both parties are, you know, are at peace with the outcome, and you've apologized and you've taken steps in your life to correct that behavior. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. But, you know, when you're a certain kind of person, you're not allowed to make a mistake. You're not allowed to, you know, have done stupid things when you were 16 and 17 years old, because they will never ever forgive you for that, and they'll never let you wear it down. And when they when you're in their crosshairs, they will try and dig up everything possible with which to ruin your life. Morbid Angel is tossing around ideas for new music. It says here, in a new interview with That Metal Interview podcast, Morbid Angel frontman Steve Tucker was asked if there are any plans for the band to work on new music as a follow-up to 2017's Kingdom Disdained album. He responded as transcribed by blabbermouth.net, "I'm hoping so, man. We're tossing around some ideas and things like that. Right now, man, we're really just trying to knock the fucking rust off, get back out, do shows. And get back to getting used to being in a band. There's a lot of social politics in a band. You have multiple members, and sometimes you have to get back in that vibe, in that groove, and get used to working together and around each other again." I liked that last record. I know that I'm in the minority on that, but I thought that last record was good. That being said, you know, it doesn't feel to me really like Morbid Angel. I might cop some flack for saying this, but they just don't feel to me like as big of a deal anymore. Like, there's a lot of excitement still around, like the new Deicide record, for example, but I don't feel like there's as much excitement around Morbid Angel as what there used to be. And maybe I'm wrong, but even Kingdom Disdained, it kind of seems like it sort of came out and then it just faded away, which is a shame because it's a good record. I think that Illud Divinum's fucking sellout nonsense. Shame on the family and shame on your names. That David Vincent record, I think it did them an awful lot of damage as a band. I think it damaged their credibility to such a point that there's probably some folks that'll never ever forgive them for that, which is a shame because you need to listen to a song called "Declaring New Law" on Kingdoms Sustained, and you'll hear that they still have a lot of fucking badassness in them, and in terms of the heaviness and the heavy riffs, Trey can still rip it up with the best of them. All right. Does Ted Nugent believe women should have access to abortion? We know how that's going to go. He will say, I don't even need to read the article to know what's going to happen. He's going to say it's evil and the worst thing on earth, and then Blabbermouth is going to post, some fucking crazy far left nonsense in there saying that, all women should have access to abortion or you're the worst person on earth, and literally Hitler. Interesting. I was watching Bill Maher, which I've gone back to, after being disillusioned with him for a very, very long time. Lately, I'm not even saying lately, maybe for the last year or so, he seems to have gotten some sense back. I was watching Real Time this past Friday, and he mentioned a very interesting statistic there. 25% of Democrats don't agree with abortion. So, it's not quite a partisan black or white binary issue. So just thought I would throw that little random bit of trivia or bit of news in there. Here's the headline I mentioned before. Mikey D is glad Lemmy doesn't have to deal with today's political correctness. He would be going crazy. No doubt they would have found something to ruin his life over by now. The guy did have some skeletons. Lars Ulrich supports Pantera reunion, says it'll be fun to have them on tour with Metallica. I'm sure it will, especially if turns in the money. It would have been nice though. I was really hoping. I think I might have mentioned this on the news rant. I was hoping that Pantera would have. Like Phil Anselmo would have, exercised a bit of his muscle in this whole thing, and gotten some, real underground bands to go on tour with him. Guys that he knows, like Gotor and bands like that. Take those bands out on tour with them, and give them the break that you guys got from Skid Row back in the day. Like Metallica got the break from Ozzy Osbourne, arguably speaking. Give that break to some other bands. I complain a lot about it on the podcast, but we listen to so many great bands on this show, and as I said earlier, a lot of these older generation bands, they're not far off from retiring, and I just don't feel like they're they're laying the track for the next generation to go on and prosper. So Pantera, Metallica touring, together, incredible lineup. If you're, if you're of a certain age, I think in particular, it'll be, one that I think a lot of, this may potentially, it's the kind of lineup where it's going to be a lot of people's first show because their parents are going to end up taking them to the show. So it's going to be a cool thing for them to see and experience. But like I said, take out some of the young bucks. Take out some bands that nobody knows. Take a risk and take out, take out Tombs, take out Gotor, take out Panzerfaust. Take out a band that's gonna, is gonna blow people's minds, but that would otherwise not have the opportunity to play in front of an audience of that size. Right, we move on. Napalm Death's Shane Embury explains why now is the right time for his autobiography. We touched on that a little bit when he was on the podcast. Yeah. Not necessarily directly related to that, but I was telling Paige a story earlier today about my misspent youth. One of the things that we would love doing is, me and my friends, we would go to birthday parties, school dances, and the like when we were about 15, 16 years old. And I remember I would take I had like a CD cover that I procured from a shop. It was like I didn't actually steal the actual CD. I just took the cover. but it was for like some dance mega mix tripe, you know, the typical trite, awful club music that kids of that age and that era would dance to. So I would take this CD cover, I would take my Napalm Death, Fear of Intense Despair CD, pop it in that, and then we would turn up at these parties, and we would give it to the DJ, and you know, obviously he'd look at the cover, it's dark, so he's not going to bother looking what's written on the CD. And the Fear of Intense Despair CD, if you've seen it, is not particularly, you know, it's not a very bold CD like it. You know, some CDs have really like bold graphics and stuff on it. This doesn't. So I would say to him, you know, play track 4, and he would take that and he'd stick it on. And track 4 on Fear, Emptiness, Despair, I think it's track 4, is a song called A Plague Rages. And we would, you know, immediately, you know, being the fucking nitwits that we were, we'd be head banging and moshing and, you know, sometimes be diving off tables onto each other and shit. Yeah. The kind of idiot things that you do when you're a kid, but I fucking loved it. I loved every second of it. But I'll never forget the looks on people's faces when A Plague Rages came on, because I mean that is such a fucking heavy song as well. Anyway, let's move on. Let's see if there's anything here. Kip Winger says James Hetfield called him to apologize for the dartboard scene in Metallica's Nothing Else Matters video. I've seen quite a lot that Kip Winger has been sobbing and crying about Metallica saying mean things to him on his or being mean to him or saying mean things about him. I do think to myself, toughen up, dude. You know, Winger, by all accounts, has done reasonably well. And, you know, again, I guess the flip side of it is you could say to the Metallica folks, toughen up, but, you know, James, you know, we've all seen some kind of monster. You know, that instead of having that fucking idiot psychiatrist there, they should have had Andrew Tate. They should have taken Andrew Tate and taken him back in fucking time and have him giving them some advice. And who knows what Metallica would be doing right now. But yeah, you know, Kip Winger needs to toughen the fuck up. There was something else that I saw as well that I wanted to talk about, and maybe this is what I'll finish up on. I just want to see if we actually get to it, or if it's one of those annoying situations or things where, you know, like Google or Facebook recommend an article that's like super, super old. Actually, before we get to that, 6 Feet Under is just about done writing next studio album. Oh my God. I truly thought that it was done. When Nightmares of the Decomposed came out, it was such a fucking terrible record. I kind of thought it was like a ironic fuck you to the music industry and to the fans. And, you know, Chris Barnes was like, you know, fuck death metal, fuck all the fans, fuck Metal Blade, fuck all y'all. And that was kind of his musical statement, or his musical fart joke, you know, and that's how he was going to say goodbye, but apparently not. So it says here, vocalist Chris Barnes and guitarist Jack Owen of death metal veterans 6 Feet Under are just about done writing the band's next studio album. According to Barnes, the material is shaping up to be, surprise, surprise, incredibly fucking heavy. 6 Feet Under's 17th full-length album, Nightmares of the Decomposed, was released on October 2020 via Metal Blade Records. To most of us, it sounded like they were taking the piss. Barnes previously stated about Nightmares of the Decomposed, working again after 25 years writing an album with my old band mate from Cannibal Corpse. Jack Owen was like coming home to a room full of dead bodies. Dead bodies and dead ideas. Jack's writing and riff work on this album gave me the fuel to write some disturbing lyrics and really set my creative mind on fire. I mean, it was so fucking bad. I cannot imagine that the new record's going to be any good. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. And for some reason, like I said, I can't seem to find the article here. So let me just do a quick search. Long story short, it seems like Doyle from the Misfits is complaining once again about having to do meet and greets for fans, and this is something that he's been doing for a long time now. I mean, I think I remember reading an article back in like 2019 where he was talking about it. I'm going to see if I can just search for the article. Misfits Doyle fans meet and greet, because I did have some thoughts on this that I wanted to share. So it says here, All right, so there's an article from February the 17th, 2019, where he talks about it. But yeah, then apparently not another one. So, yeah, no, Misfits guitarist slams the lack of money artists get from streaming. So that must have been that. It must have been just kind of, an old article that was tossed up on my Facebook news feed. But either way, I mean, let's talk about it. So he says, the Misfits guitarist slams the lack of money artists get from streaming. Long time, and this actually, is from Tone Deaf. It says, long-time Misfits guitarist Doyle Wolfgang von Frankenstein has become the latest artist to lament the lack of money received by artists from streaming services. Ever since streaming became the most popular way for music lovers to discover new tunes, artists have hit back at the services for the lack of money the musicians actually receive in the process. We've spoken about that on the podcast. While artists like Disturbed's Dave Draymond and Car Seat Headrest have defended services like Spotify, others such as Portishead have previously noted how they received a paltry $3,280 from 34 million streams, which, let's be honest, is a fucking joke. I mean, I'm as capitalist as they come, but that is an absolute disgrace. Now, longtime Misfits guitarist Doyle Wolfgang von Frankenstein has opened up about his experience in the industry, noting that illegal downloading and streaming has forced him to participate in meet and greets just to make ends meet. Speaking to the Liquid Conversations via Ultimate Guitar, Doyle explained that the state of the music industry has changed so much that it's forcing artists to make money by other means at times. The thing that sucks is that most of the music industry is that everybody steals music. Everybody steals music. Doyle began, you spend a fucking $100,000 to make a record, and all of these fucking scumbags are just fucking stealing it. And then they want more, and then you're a dick because you're doing a meet and greet for 50 fucking bucks to make up for it, which you don't want to do. You think I want to meet all these fucking people? I don't. When I'm working, I just want to take a shower and go to bed. I just worked, so you want to steal shit, Doyle continued. If I was making motorcycles and they came in and took one, would that be a crime? Why can't we punish people for stealing songs? There should be a $10,000 fine. I would say he's got a point to a degree, but I think the amount of song thievery that goes on right now, maybe I'm being naive to this, I don't think it's as bad as it used to be, certainly. And most people, I think, just go on Spotify or Qobuz or whatever the case may be. Do the revenue models on those services need to be revised? Yes. One thing that I did take a bit of umbrage with, though, and this is kind of partly why I wanted to talk about it, is he seems to have a real disdain for his own fans, which I find a bit distasteful, if I'm very honest. I mean, if I were so I get why bands would do the paid for meet and greets. Metallica, I think, does a meet and greet that's like $4,000 or something or at least they did that on their previous tour. If I were in a band, let's address the Metallica thing first. As Metallica, I get why they do it. It'd be so many people that want to meet them. If they did it for free, it would be uncontrollable. So you need a way to control the numbers, and charging the money for it is a nice way to do that. Kills two birds with one stone. Bit of extra revenue on the side, ensures that you're not overwhelmed by fans. If I were in a band if I were a musician of Doyle's stature, because Doyle, when he goes out and plays solo shows, I mean, he's not filling out, arenas and stuff like that. So would I be charging for a meet and greet? No, I don't think so. And I do feel like, especially at a show, those people have paid money to come and see you play. They've probably bought some merch. They're doing what they can to support you. Certainly way more than, just the average dickhead sitting at home streaming music on Spotify is doing. So I feel like to take that approach where you're charging the money to meet you, is fine. If you want to do that, that's, if you want to do it and there's people willing to pay for it, fine. But to kind of have the attitude that he has, where you think that you think that this is being foisted on you somehow, I don't know about that. That's a little harsh. I mean, the reason why you're able to go on the road and make music and make music a living is thanks to the people that listen to you. So I think it's a fine line there, and I think he's on the wrong side of it. The other thing that I would say, just looking at photos of the guy, I mean, he is 54, 55, maybe a little bit older, a vegan. and apparently not on steroids, which I believe that about as much as I believe that the Liver King wasn't on steroids, and frankly still isn't on steroids. There is no chance with a vegan diet that you look like a fucking, Thundercats toy. So, which is what he looks like. I mean, he looks like $1 million. There's no doubt about it. But I'm going to call full-time bullshit on the fact that he claims that he's not on steroids. Anyway, folks, I am going to wrap things up on that note. That wraps up another episode of Into the Necrosphere for this week. Episode 170 drops next week, and I will be talking to my friend Scott Taysom of Cloak about their new album, as well as a host of other topics. I will also be doing my usual weekly news rant, and I will be talking about the new Anarchon record, which also dropped this past weekend, but I've needed a bit more time to digest that one. Another absolute beast of an album. And speaking of which, I did promise that I was going to play a shortlist contender for Album of the Year to close us off. The band in question is a black metal outfit out of Iceland called Altari. They've just put out, are about to put out their record on the 14th of April through Svart Records. The album is going to be titled Kreflurdar, which I will apologize right now for most likely massacring their native tongue. But if you like black metal bands like Mysterium, and Mara, maybe a bit of Bluthaus Nord and Kraft, and you've always wanted that kind of blackness counterbalanced by some, Killing Joke post-punkness, this is the album for you. I've had it for a couple of weeks now, and I just absolutely cannot get off it. It is sensational. So I'm going to be playing the title track off the record for you. They've already put it out as a single, so I'm not dropping any exclusive, sadly. But I will strongly suggest that when this album comes out, it is on your list of things to listen to that very day. I am back next week, like I said. I'm flying off to Dublin tomorrow for work. May or may not be meeting up with somebody who I do believe the Legion will strongly approve of. If that happens, I may have my camera there, and I may have some lapel mics, but that's going to be very much dependent on some last-minute scheduling. So let's hope it happens. If it does, I'll post about it on the socials. But in the meantime, whatever it is that you're doing, wherever it is that you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next Tuesday.